Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues. I hereby declare open the 15th meeting of the 46th session of the Working Group of the Universal Periodic Review. Before we begin, please let me remind you that all delegations should upload their oral statements through the online system for inscription on the list of speakers event before the opening of the review they intend to address. Receiving the written form of oral statements ahead of time will greatly facilitate the work of the interpreters, as well as that of the Troikas and the Secretariat for their timely preparation of the working group reports after each review. We will now proceed with the review of Cambodia. In accordance with the Human Rights Council Resolution 5/1, the review is based on the national report, the compilation of UN information, and the summary of stakeholders' information, both prepared by the OHCHR. And now I have the honor to give the floor to Mr. Soti Keo, Vice Chair of the Cambodian Human Rights Committee, to introduce the report. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Madam Vice President, members of the Troika, honorable members of the United Nations, members of civil society, it is my distinct honor and privilege to address you at the onset of Cambodia's fourth cycle of the Universal Periodic Review and provide some answers to advanced questions we had received. I wish to begin by extending my appreciation to the UPR Secretariat and the Troika members for their exemplary support and arrangement for today's review. I am joined today by my fellow members of the Cambodian delegation, representing national line ministries and institutions, and colleagues from our permanent mission in Geneva, including Excellency Ambassador on my left. Cambodia has established close and constructive collaboration with various United Nations human rights mechanisms. Cambodia is the first country in Asia to host the country office for the OHCHR since 1993. We are proud to inform honorable members of the UN that Cambodia is a state party to 8 of the 9 core international UN Convention of Human Rights treaties without reservation, and is also one of the few states in the Asia-Pacific region that has delivered unfettered access to, engaged with, and continuously extended the mandate of the Special Reporter on the situation of human rights in Cambodia. Cambodia has a long track record of engaging in human rights diplomacy through dialogue and cooperation. Cambodia's participation in the past 3 UPR cycles have contributed to strengthening existing national human rights protection systems, broadening the civil political space, and invigorating socio-economic rights. Some notable policies and measures that have resulted from accepted recommendations from our previous 3rd cycle includes the successful final draft law on the establishment of the National Human Rights Institution, which has been expressed by several member states during the last review. Madam Vice President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to advocate that there exists a universal panacea for all political, economic, and social ills, a one-size-fits-all solution for all countries is impractical. Democracy and human rights values are country-specific. Cambodia applies these values with consideration for its history, culture, and development stage in order to ensure tangible outcomes. Our approach to advance democracy and the promotion and protection of human rights must therefore reflect on our past tragedy. Cambodia was once a war-torn country, submerged in the ruins of the Khmer Rouge genocide that resulted in the total collapse of institutions and the loss of nearly 2 million people. Simply put, Cambodia went back to year 0. Although marred by internal conflict and bombarded by chaos, Cambodia has successfully emerged as a peaceful and independent sovereign state, respecting the rule of law and achieving political stability, and securing dynamic growth and economic, social, and cultural development. One of Cambodia's first steps towards peace and reconciliation as a post-conflict country was to seek justice and punish the most senior and responsible leaders of the Khmer Rouge. To put this into context of how significant of an achievement this is, only a few international criminal convictions in the world have been against heads of states. Through the extraordinary chambers in the courts of Cambodia, the ECCC, a hybrid tribunal established between the royal government and with great assistance from the United Nations, Nguyen Chia and Khieu Samphan, who are among the highest levels of Khmer Rouge leaders, including Dut, were convicted of genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. Cambodia has chosen not to forget or ignore past crimes that were committed, but face head-on with its genocidal past. The ECCC has strengthened the respect for the rule of law in Cambodia and helped the royal government and helped the country heal wounds of the past, allowing the people of this country to look to the future. And as decided by the royal government and approved by the UN General Assembly, the ECCC has entered into its residual stage with a focus on archiving to preserve and promote the court's legacy, dissemination of information, and especially support projects for victims. As Cambodia continues to develop, millions of Cambodians have been lifted from their poverty and are enjoying decent livelihoods, with significantly increased life expectancy through the win-win policy of Samdech Techo Hun Sen, the former Prime Minister of Cambodia. The convergence of concentrated efforts to promote and protect human rights can be seen by prioritizing human capital development through social protection and assistance expansion, support for emergency response, and enhancing welfare holistically within the Pentagonal Strategy Phase 1 of our current Prime Minister, Samdech Mahabawar Tapadai Hun Manait. Achieving fundamental human rights that every citizen is entitled to was and remains today the first and foremost important task for the government. As we place the utmost importance on peace to be ardently cherished and protected, we recognize that peace is an enabling right, an imperative precondition foundation for the enjoyment of civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights, and the realization of sustainable development. Through peace and political stability, Cambodia's economy has been among the fastest growing economies. Cambodia's annual growth averaged 7% between 2009 and 2019. Poverty rates nearly halved from 33.8% in 2009 to 16.6% in 2022. Despite the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, Cambodia's economic growth is projected to be 5.8% in 2024 and 6% in 2025. Consequently, Cambodia transitioned to lower middle income status as set out by the World Bank Group in 2016 and is set to achieve an upper middle income status by 2030 and high income status by 2050. We are encouraged by a national review showing that most of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, along with our 18th goal of mine clearance, are on track despite global uncertainties. While Cambodia is mindful of our shortcomings, the nation strives forward to reduce poverty, vulnerability, and inequality, while boosting human development and economic growth to ensure our society becomes more inclusive, cohesive, and resilient. Cambodia has implemented wide-ranging social assistance schemes. Cambodia's social security system that was enhanced during the COVID-19 pandemic has now been integrated into Cambodians' family package to become regular national social assistance programs that support vulnerable populations from conception until death. We have also launched a voluntary-based social health protection scheme for dependents, for our National Social Security Fund members, and self-employed people in the informal economy, with the aim of moving toward universal health coverage. And with this, Cambodia has developed a roadmap towards universal health coverage 2024 to 2035. The development of Cambodia's social protection system has prominently improved, covering currently in 2024 42.1% of the population. On digital technology, Cambodia recognizes its transformative power that can be positively harnessed for sustainable development. On digital infrastructure, Cambodia is expanding connectivity that will allow for internet access to every commune by 2027. Our mobile penetration rate is currently 122.26%. We recognize that digital infrastructure must be adequate, enabling access for all, especially the rural population, so that all are empowered with access to knowledge and information, leaving no one behind. On human capital, Cambodia currently has an abundance of youths, with more than 60% below 35 years old of age, and an increasingly tech-savvy population. As outlined by our Digital Skills Development Roadmap 2023-2035, Cambodia aims to produce 100,000 digital talents in 10 years. And the royal government itself is transforming into a digital government that will better serve its people by providing transparent public services in a more efficient and effective manner, utilizing emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence. Among the many laws and policies that Cambodia is preparing, it has also finished drafting a comprehensive personal data protection law that will help secure our population's right to privacy and data protection. Madam Vice President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are proud that Cambodia's constitution is among the few, if not the only constitution, that explicitly enshrines the UN Charter and human rights instruments. Article 31 of our constitution states that the Kingdom of Cambodia shall recognize and respect human rights as stipulated in the United Nations Charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the covenants and conventions related to human rights, women's and children's rights. We respect and adhere to the UPR process as an intergovernmental discourse, state-driven and action-oriented process. It must therefore be exercised in an objective, transparent, constructive, and cooperative manner. As a small post-conflict and emerging country, Cambodia attaches great importance to a genuine dialogue-based method that is non-confrontational, non-politicized, and non-selective. We are optimistic that assessments will be conducted in a fair and balanced manner, abstaining from any preconceived prejudices and prejudgment. Cambodia remains resolute in our engagement with member states in the forthcoming exchanges during this fourth cycle of the review to further promote and protect human rights. Thank you. I'd like to now invite Excellency Longsonita to further present on the achievements of the Cambodia Human Rights Committee.
Thank you to the head of the delegation. Allow me to begin by highlighting Cambodia's industrious collaboration with the UN treaty bodies and relevant stakeholders. As a central agent of the government, the Cambodian Human Rights Committee coordinates with the line ministries and parties concerned to compile the human rights report, to be submitted to each of the UN treaty body and monitor the implementations of the recommendations accepted through the interministerial working groups such as the UPR report, the ICE-SCR report, the ICCPR report, the International Convention on Eliminations of All Forms and Racial Discrimination report, and the International Convention of Protection for All Persons from Enforced Disappearance report. To respond to some of the UN-specific report, the government also has established other central mechanism working group, including the Cambodian National Council for Women under the Ministries of Women's Affairs, on the CEDAW report with support from the UN Women and provided input by other NGO concerning with women's issue. The Cambodian National Council for Children under the Ministries of Social Affairs, Veterans and Youth Rehabilitations for the International Convention on the Rights of the Child report, to be supported from UNICEF and Child Rights Coalition Cambodia. The Disability Action Council under the Ministry of Social Affairs, Veterans and Youth Rehabilitation for the International Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities report, and the National Committee Against Torture under Cruel, Inhumane, or Degrading Treatment for Punishment under the Ministry of Interior for the International Convention Against Torture under Cruel, Inhumane, Degrading Treatment or Punishment report. And lastly, the Anti-Corruption Unit for the United Nations Convention Against Corruption report. During the third Universal Periodic Review back in 2019, Cambodia has accepted 174 recommendations from the respective member states. After the recommendations were adopted, the Cambodian Human Rights Committee also conducted national consultation with line ministries to disseminate and review the progress of the recommendation implemented. In preparing for the state's fourth UPR this year, The government produced the 2021 midterm report for the purpose of monitoring the implementations of the accepted recommendation by the relevant ministries. The national concerted effort is further compounded by the collaboration with the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights in Cambodia to conduct numerous consultations throughout the process on both drafts of the reports. Also, consultation with civil societies to receive their valuable inputs and frank feedback, ensuring a comprehensive and holistic approach is utilized. By recognizing the important roles different actors are playing, the states continue to sustain this valuable dialogue with relevant stakeholders in moving forward with the adopted recommendation to be received in this fourth UPR. In order to ensure that national policy is produced and to realize tangible outcomes that is beneficial for everyone. Furthermore, the royal government also maintain an open door policy for dialogue with civil society, and ministerial web pages are remain open to receive further comments and questions related to all matters. And in addition, the government representatives has always remained at disposal for non-governmental organizations and civil society meetings upon request to discuss further issues. Some notable policies and measures that result from the previous UPR concerning the advancements of the well-being of the people to build an inclusive and cohesive society include the successful final draft law on the establishment of the National Human Rights Institution. Excellencies, currently only 129 human rights institutions have been established worldwide. Cambodia is poised to join the 5 countries in ASEAN that have already established the national human rights institutions, including Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, and Myanmar. And in pursuing this noble goal, the royal government has collaborated and received technical support from the OACHR and the Asia-Pacific Forum of National Human Rights Institutions. There have also been 32 consultations further conducted for the draft law to ensure that it is in line with the Paris principles and that expertise are leveraged and that comprehensive inputs are received from relevant regional and international stakeholders, including the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commissions on Human Rights, the National Institutions of Human Rights of Malaysia, of Indonesia, of Philippines, the Senate and the National Assemblies, as well as the representative from embassies. Among them, there was also robust participations from national and international civil society organizations. Also, professionals in higher education from the academic institutions, from the bar associations of Cambodia, from the unions and federations, from women's and children organizations and associations of persons with disabilities, from the press units, and from the representatives of indigenous people. And finally, the draft law is then submitted to the Council of the Ministers in late 2023, where it awaits further revisions from the Council of Jurors. Thank you. I now return the floor back to the head of the delegations.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Excellency D. Kamoli, Deputy Director General of Policy and Planning of the Ministry of Education.
Madam Vice President and esteemed Member States, Excellency Head of Delegation, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I have the honor to attend the 46th session of the Universal Periodic Review Working Group and to present some of the recent significant development regarding the education sector in Cambodia in response to some of the comments raised by the esteemed Member State. Recognizing education as a fundamental right and a catalyst for progress and in line with the UN Global Agenda SDG 4, the Royal Government of Cambodia remains consistently committed to inclusive and equitable quality education and lifelong learning for all. This strategic policy has been translated into the Education Strategic Plan, ensuring that all legal residents in Cambodia have access to education institutions of their choices. The right to education is also stipulated in the Constitution of the Kingdom of Cambodia, guaranteeing free education to at least grade 9, whereas in practice, education in Cambodia from pre-primary to upper secondary K-12 is free of charge. The 7th mandate of the government has drawn close attention to improving the quality of education by introducing key measures, including the implementation of 8 priorities by the Ministry of Education as follows. strengthening school governance, reviewing and revising curricula and extracurricular activities in accordance with the need to strengthen student knowledge, discipline, ethics, and behavior, improving student health through child nutrition programs and food quality control in school, encouraging the participation of parents, guardians, and the community in education in accordance with the State-Community Partnership for Education, digital education, establishment of Center of Excellence in Higher Education, system building and capacity development, and development of physical education and sport. The Ministry of Education has demonstrated progress in reforming teacher training institutions, and in order to improve the quality of education, the Ministry implement new teaching methods for secondary education in line with the PISA assessment program, especially by integrating 21st century knowledge and skill, critical thinking skill, and problem-solving skill into the education system, and implementing early grade reading and early grade mathematics at the primary level. The Ministry also promotes digital education and e-learning platform and introduce teacher-trainer career paths. From 2018 to 2023, the Ministry has constructed 503 new school buildings and renovated 438 school buildings, with the Ministry budget and also budget from development partners like the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, EU, and China. As of December 2023, the Royal Government of Cambodia has constructed 4,545 buildings. The government also provides complementary assistance catering to the needs of population, including teacher accommodations, student dorm, school directorate, libraries, toilets, and sanitation facilities. The campaign of Clean School within the framework of the School Without Litter is to promote the well-being, sanitation, and hygiene of educators and students, while actively participating in maintaining a green school environment through education by focusing on waste storage, waste sorting, waste recycling, biodiversity conservation, and sustainable development, as well as cultivating a love for the environment to ensure students have access to adequate water and sanitation facility, clean classroom, clean school, and clean communities. In the academic year 2023-2024, according to the core breakthrough indicators, female students perform better than male students at all levels from preschool to upper secondary school. The result illustrates the special attention provided to female education in Cambodia. The Ministry of Education has provided training courses to teacher trainers on the prevention of online child exploitation, sexual abuses, and sexual transmitted disease such as HIV/AIDS. The Royal Government has taken concrete steps in integrating sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, and sexual characteristics into the curriculum for students at their appropriate age to combat discrimination. The right to education of LGBT has been integrated into the curriculum of grade 5 to 12, the lesson of which has been widely disseminated via Ministry social media and other digital platforms. The Ministry has so far trained 8,000 teachers on the rights to education of the LGBT. Madam Vice President, further progress is exemplified by the Ministry of Education implementation of multilingual education program in 96 schools in 18 districts in remote provinces of the kingdom, including Ratanakiri, Mandolkiri, Kreceh, and Steng Train provinces. By focusing on equitable and inclusive access to education, children with disability from ethnic minority and children living in rural and urban disadvantaged areas are identified among the priority groups. The Ministry of Education established the National Institute of Special Education and Department of Special Education and developed policy on the education of children with disability, inclusive education policy, reference documents for special education teachers, and supporting documents to identify children with disability. Once again, I would like to convey my deep thanks to Madam Vice President, the opportunity to represent reform and development in the education sector. I now return the floor back to Excellency Chair.
Thank you very much. I'd like to return the floor to Madam Vice President. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, for the presentations. We shall now begin our interactive dialogue. I would like to remind you that the speaking time will be 1 minute and 10 seconds for all. As usual, issues of a political, bilateral, or territorial nature should be kept out of our deliberations. Moreover, United Nations terminology should be used when referring to states or territories. Only the use of the words recommend or recommendation will ensure that the relevant parts of your statements are included in the recommendations section of the Working Group report. Also, allow me to recall that the Human Rights Council strongly rejects any act of intimidation or reprisal against individuals or groups who cooperate or have cooperated with the United Nations and its representatives and mechanisms in the field of human rights. We will now begin with the list of speakers, and I will give the floor to Iran.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The Islamic Republic of Iran welcomes the delegation of Cambodia headed by Mr. Ko Suti, Vice President of the Cambodia Human Rights Committee, and commend their full engagement with the UPR mechanism. Acknowledging decades of economic growth in Cambodia resulting to a considerable reduction in poverty, the Islamic Republic of Iran recommends the continuation of all such developing steps, mainly in rural areas. With cognizance of the vulnerabilities of Cambodia with climate change challenges, we recommend Cambodia to strengthen its internal efforts to ensure the reduction of negative impact of climate change on enjoyment of human rights, especially for elderly and persons with disability. We also recommend that Cambodia continue its valuable efforts for provision of safe and affordable clean water for all to fully realize its vision for the National Strategic Plan on Rural Water Supply. We wish very success for Cambodia in implementing the recommendations. Thank you.
I thank Iran for your statement and give the floor to Iraq.
شكرا السيدة نائب الرئيس. يرحب وفد جمهورية العراق برئيس وأعضاء وفد مملكة كمبوديا ويقدر الجهود المبذولة في إعداد وتقديم التقرير الرابع. يثمن وفد العراق جهود مملكة كمبوديا في مجال إصلاح الحوكمة وتحديث مؤسسات الدولة وخططها لتحسين المستوى المعيشي للأفراد وفقاً للسياسات الوطنية. وبروح الحوار البناء يتقدم وفد العراق بالتوصيات الآتية: أولاً، تسريع الجهود لإنشاء مؤسسة وطنية لحقوق الإنسان وفقاً لمبادئ باريس. ثانياً، بذل المزيد من الجهود للحد من الاتجار بالأشخاص. ثالثاً، تحسين ظروف العمل. ختاماً، يتمنى وفد العراق لوفد مملكة كمبوديا التوفيق في هذا الاستعراض. شكراً السيدة نائب الرئيس.
I thank Iraq for your statement and give the floor to Ireland.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Ireland welcomes the delegation of Cambodia and thanks it for its presentation today. Ireland acknowledges Cambodia's efforts to advance human rights domestically and notes progress made since the last UPR cycle, including the adoption of the third National Action Plan to prevent violence against women in 2020. However, Ireland is concerned by restrictions on political freedoms, democratic space, freedom of opinion and expression, and freedom of the press in Cambodia. We also regret the shrinking of civil society space and allegations of torture and ill treatment of people in custody. Ireland recommends that Cambodia: 1. Amend the law on associations and non-governmental organisations to comply with the ICCPR in a transparent consultative process and take into account the recommendations of civil society. And 2. Establish an independent accountability system to resolve land disputes in a fair, inclusive, participatory, time-bound and transparent way. We wish Cambodia every success in this UPR cycle. Thank you.
I thank Ireland for your statement and give the floor to Italy.
Madam Vice President, we thank the distinguished delegation of Cambodia for the presentation. Italy notes with appreciation Cambodia's cooperation with United Nations human rights mechanisms, particularly with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Italy sees this opportunity to have for Cambodia the following recommendations. 1. Guarantee the right to freedom of opinion and expression, as well as the right to freedom of assembly and association, in accordance with international obligations to provide an enabling environment for journalists, human rights defenders and political activists. 2. Continue to implement measures to ensure the independence of the judiciary and media. 3. Step up efforts to fight against trafficking in person, in particular women and children, and to combat forced labor and sexual exploitation. 4. Consider adopting an adequate legal framework to recognize and protect the rights of indigenous peoples and ethnic minorities in relation to land and resources. We wish Cambodia a successful review. I thank you.
Thank Italy for your statement and give the floor to Japan.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Japan warmly welcomed the Cambodian delegations. Japan appreciates the government of Cambodia's recent extension of a MOU with the OHCHR office in Phnom Penh. We also recognize Cambodia's continuous efforts to promote social economic development and improve the situation of vulnerable groups, including its effort to protect the rights of women and children. Japan would like to make the following two recommendations. First, ensure the protection and the promotion of civil and political rights, including freedom of expression, the press, assembly, and association, to foster an environment in which people can freely express valuable opinions. Second, take steps to address the risk to human rights in the context of business activities, including in the improvement of working conditions and labor standards and in fight against human trafficking. Japan stands ready to support Cambodia's section. We wish the delegation of Cambodia every success in this review. I thank you.
I thank Japan for your statement and give the floor to Kyrgyzstan by video.
Thank you, Mr. President. Kyrgyzstan welcomes the delegation of Cambodia, appreciates the engagement in the UPR process as well as the developments made since the last UPR review. We recommend 1. Continue cooperation with UN bodies and mechanisms of the Human Rights Council. 2. Effectively implement the Pentagonal strategy focusing on growth, employment, equity, efficiency, and sustainability. 3. Continue emphasizing investment in gender equality, women's rights protection, accountability mechanisms, and economic empowerment. We wish Cambodia success in this 4th UPR cycle. Thank you.
I thank Kyrgyzstan for your statement and give the floor to Lao People's Democratic Republic.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. My delegation thanks Cambodia for the presentation. The Laupedia commends Cambodia for its remarkable achievements in poverty reduction, rural development, and infrastructure improvement, which have contributed to advancing human rights and well-being of Cambodian people. The Laupedia recommends the following. 1. Strengthen efforts to improve the quality of education and the accessibility to education for all. And 2. Continue efforts to promote and protect the rights of persons with disabilities through the effective implementation of the National Strategy on Disability. We wish Cambodia a success in this UPR review. I thank you.
I thank Lao for your statement and give the floor to Lebanon.
Merci, Madame la Vice-Présidente. Le Liban souhaite la bienvenue à la délégation du Cambodge et salue les efforts du pays pour protéger et promouvoir les droits de l'homme. Le Liban apprécie particulièrement l'engagement du Cambodge pour l'amélioration des secteurs de l'éducation et de la santé, ainsi que pour la lutte contre toutes les formes de discrimination. Dans un esprit de dialogue constructif, le Liban recommande au Cambodge 1. D'intensifier les efforts pour éliminer toutes les formes de traite des personnes et l'exploitation sexuelle des femmes et des enfants qui peut en découler. 2. De renforcer la protection des droits des peuples autochtones. 3. De continuer à œuvrer pour rendre le secteur de l'éducation plus inclusif, notamment des enfants en situation de handicap, tout en luttant plus efficacement contre le phénomène de l'abandon scolaire. En conclusion, le Liban souhaite au Cambodge un plein succès lors de cet examen. Merci, Madame la Vice-Présidente.
I thank Lebanon for your statement and give the floor to Lesotho.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Lesotho welcomes the distinguished delegation of Cambodia and recognizes the several efforts made to advance human rights in Cambodia since the previous UPR cycle. Cambodia's commendable progress in enhancing living standards, socioeconomic development, and poverty alleviation is highly appreciated. In light of the above, Lesotho believes there are areas where Cambodia can further enhance its human rights record and therefore wishes to recommend the following: to accelerate efforts to mitigate incidences of excessive use of force and ill-treatment of detainees by law enforcement agencies. 2, to strengthen efforts to prevent violations of the rights of freedom of expression, association, and peaceful assembly as guaranteed in the ICCPR. And lastly, to bolster the protection of women's rights, specifically through the reform of the law of the prevention of domestic violence, such that legislation is in line with the CEDAW and ICCPR recommendations. Lesotho appreciates Cambodia's engagement with the UPR process and wishes the delegation every success in this cycle. Thank you.
I thank Lesotho for your statement and give the floor to Liechtenstein by video.
Thank you, Mr. President. In a constructive spirit, Liechtenstein recommends that Cambodia first ratify the Kampala amendments to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court on the crime of aggression. Second, ratify the second optional protocol to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, aiming at the abolition of the death penalty. Third, develop transparent regulations and safeguarding policies to protect the right to privacy and ensure safety in the digital environment, especially for children. Fourth, ensure that cases of gender-based discrimination and violence against women and girls are thoroughly investigated, perpetrators are prosecuted, adequately punished, and victims are provided with remedies. We thank you.
I thank Liechtenstein for your statement and give the floor to Lithuania.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Lithuania warmly welcomes the delegation of Cambodia and thanks it for its national report. We acknowledge the progress made since the last UPR cycle in promoting and protecting the rights of persons with disabilities and increasing their equal participation in all spheres of life. In this regard, we note the introduction of employment quotas and reforms on access to education and healthcare. The role of civil society is crucial in promoting further social inclusion. Lithuania wishes to offer Cambodia the following recommendations. 1. Ensure that national security legislation clearly defines grounds for possible limitations to freedom of expression in line with international standards, including the provisions of the ICCPR. 2. Enhance efforts to effectively monitor and investigate all cases of sexual violence against children, ensure accountability of perpetrators, and provide adequate support services for child victims. 3. Consider adopting a dedicated law on the protection of the rights of persons with disabilities in compliance with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We wish Cambodia all success in the current UPR. Thank you.
I thank Lithuania for your statement and give the floor to Luxembourg.
Merci Madame la Vice-présidente. Le Luxembourg souhaite la bienvenue à la délégation du Cambodge et la remercie pour la présentation de son rapport national. Dans un esprit de coopération constructive, le Luxembourg recommande 1. Coopérer pleinement avec le rapporteur spécial sur la situation des droits de l'homme au Cambodge, notamment à la mise en œuvre de ces 10 recommandations présentées en octobre 2023. 2. Protéger les droits à la liberté d'opinion et d'expression et de réunion pacifiques, notamment des opposants politiques, des journalistes et des défenseurs des droits de l'homme, notamment ceux qui défendent les droits fonciers, et s'abstenir de toute intimidation à leur égard. 3. Accélérer la mise en place d'une institution nationale des droits de l'homme pleinement conforme avec les principes de Paris, dotée des ressources nécessaires pour travailler en toute indépendance et en sécurité. 4. Protéger le droit de tous les travailleurs dans les secteurs formels et informels et assurer qu'ils disposent d'une protection sociale adéquate et d'un salaire décent, et prendre des mesures répressives efficaces contre la traite et le travail des enfants. 5. Mettre fin à la corruption et à l'impunité liées aux questions foncières et protéger les lanceurs d'alerte, les témoins et les victimes. Je vous remercie.
I thank Luxembourg for your statement and give the floor to Malawi.
Madam Vice President, Malawi welcomes Cambodia to this review and thanks the delegation for the comprehensive presentation. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, Malawi makes the following recommendations to Cambodia. 1. Continue with efforts to fight discrimination against indigenous people and minorities. 2. Continue with reform measures being taken to improve the efficiency of judiciary at all levels. And 3. Continue taking all measures to combat trafficking in persons. We wish Cambodia all the best at this review. I thank you, Madam Vice President.
I thank Malawi for your statement and give the floor to Malaysia.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Malaysia commends Cambodia for its constructive cooperation with the OHCHR in promoting human rights through technical cooperation programs. We applaud Cambodia for taking numerous efforts to strengthen health, education, socio-economic development, and poverty reduction in the country. On the regional front, Malaysia appreciates Cambodia's important contribution to the ASEAN community building and the realization of the ASEAN Common Human Rights Agenda. In the spirit of constructive engagement, Malaysia recommends, first, continue to invest in programs on poverty reduction, rural development, and infrastructure improvements to uplift living standards and promote inclusive growth in the country. Second, strengthen efforts to promote economic and social development, including by creating more economic opportunities, improving essential services such as healthcare and education, and increasing participation in capacity building programs offered by individual member states, regional and international community. And third, continue collaboration with various UN human rights mechanisms, particularly with the OHCHR, and we wish Cambodia a successful review. Thank you.
I thank Malaysia for your statement and give the floor to Maldives.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The Maldives warmly welcomes the high-level delegation from Cambodia to this fourth cycle review and thanks the delegation for their presentation today. We commend the government of Cambodia for its unwavering commitment to secure equitable and universal access to safe and affordable water for all, particularly through the execution of the Cambodian Sustainable Development Goals 2016 to 2030 and the creation of the National Strategic Plan on Rural Water Supply, Sanitation and Hygiene 2014 to 2025 to fully realize the right to water for all. In constructive spirit, the Maldives makes the following two recommendations. One, intensify efforts to establish a comprehensive social security system with universal coverage for all. Two, continue to implement measures to provide inclusive education for children with disabilities in mainstream schools with the necessary support by specialized staff. We wish Cambodia a successful review. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
I thank Maldives for your statement and give the floor to Malta.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Malta welcomes the delegation of Cambodia to this session. Malta acknowledges that progress has been registered in various sectors, including the provision of health services, access to clean water supplies, electricity, and other civic amenities. We do remain concerned on the frequency of crackdowns on independent media, civil society organizations, and the political opposition. Similarly, freedom of association has come under threat, particularly with the use of police arresting and harassing protesters and striking workers at various instances throughout the period under review. Human trafficking is also an issue which deserves serious attention and policies to combat and eliminate its frequency. We would like to recommend 1. To ratify the second optional protocol to the ICCPR aiming at the abolition of the death penalty. 2. To take steps to fully investigate allegations of torture and ill treatment occurring in police custody and in other places of detention, which in some cases has resulted in deaths. And 3. Introduce legal safeguards to protect freedom of expression and association, including for civil society. We wish Cambodia a successful review. I thank you, Madam Vice President.
I thank Malta for your statement and give the floor to Mauritius by video.
Chair, the Mauritius delegation would like to extend a very warm welcome to the delegation of Cambodia attending this fourth cycle of the UPR. We welcome the progress made by Cambodia since its last review. We congratulate the country for the socio-economic progress made so far and look forward to their early graduation from the least developed country status to a developing country, as it is projected. We commend Cambodia for the infrastructural development which reduced poverty levels by almost half since 2009. In a constructive spirit, Mauritius would like to recommend that Cambodia ratify the UNESCO Convention Against Discrimination in Education, as has been recommended by UNESCO, and that it pursue its efforts to promote accessible, affordable, and quality education. We wish Cambodia a very successful review. Thank you, Chair.
I thank Mauritius for your statement and give the floor to Mexico.
Gracias, señora vicepresidenta.
Agradecemos a Camboya por su informe. Saludamos el Plan Estratégico Nacional de Discapacidad, el Plan Voluntario de Seguridad Social en Atención Médica y las directrices sobre protección infantil en línea para la industria de la tecnología digital. Respetuosamente recomendamos revisar los artículos 21, 22, 943 y 948 del Código Civil para fijar en 18 años sin excepción la edad mínima de contraer matrimonio. Prohibir los matrimonios y uniones infantiles y forzadas e implementar campañas de sensibilización sobre sus impactos. 2. Fortalecer los esfuerzos para prevenir, investigar y sancionar los casos de trata de personas con fines de explotación sexual y laboral, especialmente en centros de estafas cibernéticas. Y 3. Y garantizar a las víctimas protección suficiente y reparación íntegra, atendiendo a las necesidades particulares de mujeres y niñas. Y 3. Avanzar en la construcción de un marco jurídico que reconozca legalmente la identidad de género autodefinida, así como el matrimonio igualitario entre personas del mismo sexo. Deseamos a Camboya éxito en este ciclo. Aukun.
I thank Mexico for your statement and give the floor to Mongolia.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Mongolia takes positive note of Cambodia's efforts to cooperate with the UN human rights mechanisms. In the spirit of constructive engagement, Mongolia recommends Cambodia to 1. Strengthen the legislation and further enhance its efforts to fight trafficking in persons, including women and children and those in situations of forced labor, by taking victim protection and preventive measures. 2. Expedite its process to adopt a comprehensive child protection law in line with the Convention on the Rights of the Child. 3. Step up its efforts to address gender-based discrimination and violence, including domestic violence against women and girls. 4. Accelerate its process to establish an independent national human rights institution in compliance with the Paris Principles. I thank you.
I thank Mongolia for your statement and give the floor to Montenegro.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Montenegro thanks the delegation of Cambodia for the presentation of its national report. We recognize aspirations of the government to reinforce laws and other legislative solutions aiming to improve overall conditions for the promotion and protection of human rights. Strengthening public institutions is of key importance towards successful implementation of these measures in law and in practice. Montenegro encourages further steps on raising awareness and protection of women and children through tailor-made campaigns with a focus on systemic prevention of violence. In that vein, we welcome the work on the implementation plan of the national policy for the child protection system for the period 2019-2029. Montenegro recommends to the government of Cambodia the following: to adopt a comprehensive law covering all principles and provisions of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, to ensure effective enforcement of the law on suppression of human trafficking and sexual exploitation. We wish Cambodia a successful review. I thank you.
Thank Montenegro for your statement and give the floor to Morocco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My delegation thanks the delegation of Cambodia for the presentation of its report. Morocco commends the efforts and progress made by Cambodia in implementing the recommendations made from the previous cycles of UPR to strengthening national human rights protection system and enhancing civil, political, socio-economic, and cultural rights, which demonstrate the great importance attached by the Cambodian government to pluralism, inclusivity, and the rule of law. In a constructive spirit, my delegation would like to make the following recommendations. First, to ratify the optional protocol to the Convention on the Right of Child on a communications procedure and reinforce efforts to strengthen children's access to justice. And second, to review the law on associations and non-governmental organizations and the trade union law to ensure their consistency with the state's obligations under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Morocco wishes full success for Cambodia in this UPR. Thank you.
I thank Morocco for your statement and give the floor to Nepal.
Madam Vice President, Nepal welcomes the delegation of Cambodia to the fourth cycle of UPR and thanks them for the presentation of the report. We appreciate the policy initiative and measures taken to implement the recommendation of the last UPR, notably the rectangular strategy, phase 4, for strengthening the role of women in economy and society, National Action Plan on the reduction of child labor and elimination of worst form of child labor, and National Policy for Child Protection System. In a constructive spirit, we recommend Cambodia the following. 1. Continue efforts to strengthen national human rights institutions in line with the Paris Principle. 2. Consider ratifying second optional protocol to the ICCPR aimed at abolishing the death penalty. 3. Redouble efforts to end violence against women and girls. We wish Cambodia a successful review. I thank you.
I thank Nepal for your statement and give the floor to the Netherlands.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The Kingdom of the Netherlands welcomes the delegation of Cambodia and commends the government for its commitment to promote inclusiveness of sexual orientation, particularly for LGBTQI+ persons. However, we remain concerned about reprisals and arbitrary restrictions against human rights defenders, journalists, and civil society organizations. Therefore, the Netherlands recommends to, firstly, abolish or amend Articles 494 and 495 of the Criminal Code, repeal the 2021 sub-decree on the establishment of the National Internet Gateway, and repeal the law on associations and non-governmental organizations to ensure a free civic space and protect fundamental freedoms of human rights defenders and journalists. Secondly, continue progress towards enacting legal amendments to recognize legal marriage equality for same-sex couples to guarantee full equality and social inclusion of LGBTQI+ persons. We wish Cambodia every success in its review. Thank you.
I thank the Netherlands for your statement and give the floor to New Zealand.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. New Zealand warmly welcomes the delegation from Cambodia. We welcome Cambodia's intention to establish an NHRI in line with the Paris Principles and commend Cambodia's positive progress on LGBTQI+ rights. New Zealand recommends that Cambodia, 1.
Excuse me, can you please bring the mic closer to your and start again? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. We warmly welcome the delegation from Cambodia. We welcome Cambodia's intention to establish an NHRI in line with the Paris Principles and commend Cambodia's positive progress on LGBTQI rights. New Zealand recommends that Cambodia, 1. Open up political and civic space and re-enfranchise political parties consistent with its international human rights obligations, including the guarantees in Article 25 of the ICCPR that every citizen has the right to take part in public affairs through freely chosen representatives. 2. Reverse the forced closure of media outlets and repeal provisions in the Criminal Code that criminalize defamation and restrict freedom of expression and assembly. And 3. Release immediately and unconditionally all remaining political prisoners, human rights defenders, journalists, media personnel, and other advocates of human rights and democracy, and drop all charges against them, including the release of opposition leader Kem Sokha. We thank the delegation of Cambodia for its participation today and its consideration of these recommendations. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
I thank New Zealand for your statement and give the floor to Norway.
Vice President, Norway welcomes Cambodia's delegation and thanks it for the presentation of its report. We welcome improvements made by Cambodia, including with respect to women's rights and gender equality, but remain concerned about democratic development and limited political and civic space. Norway recommends that Cambodia, 1. Ensure the right to freedom of expression, association, and peaceful assembly, and end practices of arbitrary arrests and detention of human rights defenders, political opponents, trade unionists, and journalists. 2. Restore civic space and create the conditions for a genuine multi-party democracy, including free and fair elections, and ensure independent media. 3. Implement judicial reforms safeguarding the independence and impartiality of the court system, court personnel, and judges in accordance with international standards. Thank you.
I thank Norway for your statement and give the floor to Pakistan.
Madam Vice President, Pakistan warmly welcomes the delegation of Cambodia and thanks it for the presentation of its 4th UPR report. We appreciate the legislative, policy, and institutional measures enacted by the government of Cambodia to promote and protect the rights of its citizens, particularly programs for socioeconomic development, poverty reduction, supply of clean water, and enhanced access to healthcare. In a constructive spirit, Pakistan has the following recommendations for Cambodia's consideration. Further strengthen measures to enhance healthcare services especially by greater allocation of resources to the National Strategic Plan to End Tuberculosis for 2021 to 2030, and redouble efforts for effective implementation of the National Action Plan to prevent violence against women. My delegation wishes Cambodia a very successful review. I thank you.
I thank Pakistan for your statement and give the floor to Panama by video.
Gracias, señor presidente. Panamá saluda a la distinguida delegación de Camboya y agradece la presentación de su informe nacional. En un espíritu constructivo y de cooperación, recomendamos aumentar el acceso de las personas que consumen drogas a los servicios sanitarios y sociales, incluyendo la prevención, información, reducción de daños y tratamiento, los cuales deben ser voluntarios, de fácil acceso para todas las personas, no discriminatorios y de buena calidad. Crear programas para preservar las prácticas sostenibles, la historia, las lenguas y la cultura de los pueblos indígenas. Desarrollar un plan de acción nacional para prevenir el matrimonio infantil y el embarazo en la adolescencia y garantizar que las niñas participen en su diseño e implementación. Le deseamos a Camboya éxitos en este cuarto ciclo del EPU. Muchas gracias.
I thank Panama for your statement and give the floor to Paraguay by video.
Saludamos a la delegación de Camboya y agradecemos su informe. Celebramos la cooperación constructiva con la Oficina del Alto Comisionado y los demás procedimientos especiales del Consejo. Valoramos sus esfuerzos para fortalecer su marco normativo, institucional y de políticas y alentamos a seguir implementándolo con enfoque de derechos humanos. Respetuosamente recomendamos 1. Ratificar la Convención Internacional sobre la Protección de los Derechos de todos los trabajadores migratorios y de sus familiares, el protocolo facultativo y el protocolo facultativo del Pacto Internacional de Derechos Civiles y Políticos para abolir la pena de muerte. 2. Realizar investigaciones exhaustivas e independientes sobre todas las denuncias de acoso, intimidación y detención arbitraria y actos de violencia contra miembros y simpatizantes de los partidos de oposición. 3. Garantizar la aplicación efectiva de la Ley de Lucha contra la Trata de Personas y Explotación Sexual. 4. Garantizar que los refugiados accedan de forma efectiva a la ciudadanía camboyana o a otras formas de estatuto permanente dentro del país a las que tuvieran derecho en virtud de la ley. Y 5. Establecer un mecanismo nacional de implementación, informe y seguimiento de recomendaciones en derechos humanos, considerando la posibilidad de recibir cooperación para el efecto. Muchísimas gracias.
I thank Paraguay for your statement and give the floor to the Philippines.
Mr. Vice President, the Philippines warmly welcomes the delegation of Cambodia. We laud the strides made by Cambodia in raising the living standards of its people, particularly in terms of access to education and health services. We particularly note the declining trend of maternal, infant, and child under 5 mortality rates, as well as the expansion of school infrastructures across the country during the review period. Cambodia's long-standing constructive engagement with OHCHR and other human rights mechanisms and bilateral partners to further develop its human rights frameworks is likewise noteworthy. We welcome Cambodia's acknowledgement of the challenges and constraints it faces and a commitment to forge ahead with its human rights agenda. We recommend the following. 1. Continue to align domestic frameworks with international obligations and standards, including by expediting the establishment of a national human rights institution and judicial reforms. 2. Intensify the campaign to combat human trafficking for the purpose of forced labor and sexual exploitation, especially women and girls. 3. Strengthen preventive and access to justice mechanisms in the fight against child labor. We wish Cambodia all success in its review. Thank you.
I thank the Philippines for your statement, and I would now like to give the floor back to the delegation of Cambodia to address observations and comments that have been raised so far. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. I'd like to give the floor to Dr. Sokratichat, Advisor, Ministry of Land Management, Urban Planning and Construction.
Merci Madame la Vice-Présidente. Je réponds à la question posée par Madame, Monsieur le représentant de l'Irlande, de Lesotho, de Luxembourg. Donc je vous présente de ce que le gouvernement de Cambodge est en train de faire. En avril 2024, le ministère de l'Aménagement du territoire, de l'urbanisme et de la Constitution a délivré 7 495 951 titres fonciers, dont 7 millions de parcelles, 60%, ont été achevés au cours de la première phase et 995 et 951 parcelles pour la deuxième phase, soit 9,92% des 5 millions de parcelles, et mettre en place 65 stations topographiques permanentes dans les communes, provinces de tout le pays. Dans le même temps, le ministère a résolu un total de 15 061 cas de tout type de conflits fonciers et est en train de résoudre 1 771 autres cas, soit 99,80% du total des cas ont été résolus. Parallèlement aux efforts visant à fournir des titres fonciers à la population, le gouvernement royal a également mis en place des politiques telles que la politique d'octroi de concession foncière sociale à ceux qui manquaient de terrain d'habitation, fournissant ainsi une superficie totale de 1 356 752,14 hectares, à un total de 457 familles et la constitution d'un total de 8 141 maisons pour elles. Et la politique d'enrichissement foncier et les droits d'utilisation des terres des communautés autochtones, délivrer des titres fonciers collectifs pour 42 communautés, soit 1105 titres avec 41 538,32 hectares pour 4 159 familles, et réviser le formulaire et les procédures de demande d'enrichissement foncier collectif afin de faciliter et d'accélérer le respect des exigences de demande des peuples autochtones. Afin de parvenir à l'égalité dans le secteur foncier et de bénéficier d'avantages équitables entre les femmes et les hommes dans le secteur foncier, le gouvernement royal a défini les principes et les mesures à prendre telles que 1. Les femmes sont assurées de recevoir des avantages égaux de toute activité au programme du secteur foncier. 2. Les femmes et les hommes ont un accès égal à l'information sur les politiques et les lois liées au secteur foncier. 3. L'enregistrement du terrain ou la délivrance d'un certificat d'identification du propriétaire immobilier doit être défini comme propriété commune des époux ou propriété séparée du mari ou de la femme et doit être effectué avec la participation des femmes sur la base des règles juridiques et aspects sociaux. 4. Les femmes chefs de famille possédant des titres fonciers peuvent les mettre en garantie. 5. Les femmes et les hommes devraient bénéficier des chances égales de participer à la formulation d'observations sur la mise en œuvre, le développement et la réception d'avantages équitables, inclusifs et transparents dans le secteur foncier. 6. La représentation des femmes dans tous les comités du secteur foncier est encouragée et le rôle de leadership à tous les niveaux doit être promu étape par étape. 7. Renforcer les capacités des autorités à tous les niveaux et accroître en particulier chez les femmes une sensibilisation générale aux droits fonciers. 8. Toutes les parties prenantes, en particulier les citoyens des deux sites, doivent s'impliquer dans la planification de la gestion du territoire, le plan directeur d'aménagement du territoire, le plan d'aménagement du territoire et le plan de développement. 9. L'attribution des terres par la mise en œuvre de concessions foncières sociales ou l'attribution des terres dans le but de réduire la pauvreté sous forme de dons et de réinstallation doit être effectuée de manière équitable et en promouvant l'égalité entre les femmes et les hommes. Et 10. Les plans stratégiques pour l'intégration du genre dans le secteur foncier à court terme, moyen terme et long terme doivent inclure des stratégies de développement des capacités. La mise en œuvre de ces plans doit être suivie, examinée et évaluée par les ministères et institutions concernées. Merci. Je donne parole à mon chef de délégation.
Thank you very much. I'd like to give the floor to Her Excellency Nyin Suchitra, Director General from the Ministry of Women's Affairs.
Thank you very much, Excellency, Head Delegates, and good morning, Madam Vice President, ladies and gentlemen. I have a great honor to participate in this important session, and I am very pleased to provide to you the key up-to-date on the gender equality and the prevention of violence against women, including child marriage in Cambodia, and also respond to the comment raised by Nepal, Mexico, Pakistan, Lesotho, and Lake Systems that you have raised comment regarding to violence against women in Cambodia. We are recognize that women and girls globally, as well as in Cambodia, face significant gender inequality and discrimination. Cambodia continue to promote gender equality and face discrimination in all aspects of life through policy development and implementation. The Royal Government of Cambodia in the 7th mandate continue to prioritize the promotion of gender equality and empowerment of women in all sectors through its policy agenda and the Pentagon Strategy Phase 1 for growth, employment, equity, effectiveness, and sustainability, recognizing that women are at core in the effort. In this way, the government promotes gender equality by increasing investment in women in the economy, education, health, public leadership, and governance. The Nari Ratana 6 is a key strategy and 5 years priority package of the Ministry of Women Affairs with 41 interventions for boosting and promoting gender equality in the political agenda and program at all levels and all sectors. The draft national policy on gender equality is the first ever policy document in Cambodia that provides for a gender transformative approach in all sectors to promote accountability, to develop approach to promote accountability, develop approach to for institutionalize of gender in line ministry institution and gender responsive budget program promote a monitoring and evaluation system and transformation of social mindset, attitude, and behavior. The national and subnational mechanisms have been working actively to promote gender equality, gender responsive women's rights and prevention of violence against women at all levels. And the proportion of women in decision-making position in the public sector has steadily increased at all levels. Women from diverse backgrounds such as LGBTQI, women with disability, women in ethnic and indigenous community, older and younger women have been prioritized in policy response to promote inclusion such as the National Action Plan to Prevent Violence Against Women. Women entrepreneurship is strong, and the World Bank report in 2020 suggests that Cambodia ranked the highest among countries in the world where women are free to start a business. The Ministry of Women Affairs led the implementation of the project to promote women economic empowerment in the digital age. Girls have reached gender parity in education, especially in primary and lower secondary education. The National Action Plan to Prevent Violence Against Women 2019 to 2023 has just completed, and the development of the next plan is underway. It prioritizes prevention of violence, promotion of laws and policy, and quality essential service. The recent review found that its implementation led to improved coordination, improved service response. Intimate partner violence has decreased. According to the recent demography and health survey found that the percentage of women aged between 50 to 49 have experienced emotional, physical, or sexual violence by the current partner. Most of current intimate partner in their lifetime have decreased from 29% in 2014 to 21% in 2020. The law on the prevention of domestic violence and the protection of victims is planned to review and reform to ensure that the alignment with the international standard and best practice. A roadmap for the reform has been completed that will guide the way forward. An analysis of a harmful social norm that a perpetrator of gender-based violence was conducted that will inform the development of the prevention strategy of the National Action Plan to prevent gender-based violence. 2 national helplines have been established with standard operating procedure to provide information and referral to gender-based violence survival. A safe app has been developed that will provide access to inform on GBV, available service and support, and link to urgent help. Multi-sectoral coordination mechanisms have been established and operational in selected 9 provinces and 39 districts with frontline service providers trained on a quality response to GBV. And the standard operating procedure have been developed to guide the development of one-stop service unit at the hospital. Currently, the one-stop service unit established and operating in 6 provinces. The positive parenting strategy was developed with a key element training on parenting without violence of any kind, aiming to prevent violence now and in the future. The impact evaluation showed that physical violence against children was reduced. Standard operating procedure for child protection have been developed and implemented to guide child protection practice at the subnational level. The prevention of child marriage and teenage pregnancy remain a priority. The Ministry of Women's Affairs, with the support from UNICEF and collaboration with NGOs, in the prevention program to address child marriage in the province where the high rates. And we conduct a national study in 9 provinces, and based on the study, we will develop the National Action Plan to prevent violence, to prevent child marriage and adolescence as a nationwide. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I'd like to now give the floor to His Excellency Somjamnan, Secretary of State, Ministry of Labor and Vocational Training.
Thank you so much, Excellency Head of Delegations, Excellency Vice President, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to address this very important UPR in my capacity as the Secretary of State of the Ministry of Labor and Vocational Training of Cambodia. While taking recommendations of all countries into consideration with high appreciation, I would like to share with you the fact about some of the key achievements in promoting decent work and protection of freedom of association in Cambodia. First, Cambodia is one of very few countries that implement the policy which link international trade with working conditions. For these reasons, we are the first country that has implemented the ILO Better Factory program, which has now been replicated in many countries. Moreover, we are among very few countries in the world that have implemented the ILO Decent Work Country Program, DWCP, and our 6th DWCP 2024-2028 is due to sign tomorrow. With regard to freedom of associations, Cambodia is one of the only 4 countries in ASEAN that ratify ILO Convention 87 and 98. In line with our constitution, the labor law and the trade union law provide the rights to worker and employer to form their respective professional organizations at their choice and to exercise their freedom without any intimidation, as long as it is done without any violation to the right of others and the law. It is to emphasize that the trade union law of Cambodia provides even better conditions for workers to form trade union than what provided for by the ILO recommendation, as well as the law of some countries in the regions, because workers can form as many trade unions as they want in one enterprise. As a practice, we currently have on average 4 to 5 trade unions in one enterprise. This is very, very unique. Our trade union law was amended in 2020 to simplify the registration process after a series of comprehensive tripartite consultations and the technical support from the ILO. No registration application has ever been rejected as long as the administrative requirements are fulfilled. Evidentially, before the adoption of the law on trade union in 2016, we had only 3,626 professional organizations registered with the ministry. But as of March 2024, we have 6,317 professional organizations, accounting for 74.21% increase. And within the last 8 months, 123 professional organizations comprising of 121 local trade unions and 2 confederation trade unions have been registered. The sharp increase in the number of professional organizations following the adoption of an amendment of the law on trade union is an indisputable testament that the registration is not an issue. So, the complaint of 1 or 2 trade unions that resist to comply with the law is not justified, although such complaint has always been addressed. In terms of trade union protection, no trade union member in Cambodia has ever been arrested or prosecuted for their legal actions. Like other countries, Cambodia strongly upholds the rule of law, so legal action is not taken based on who the perpetrators are, but what they did. And this legal action is consistent with the decision of the Committee on Freedom of Association of the ILO, which I would like to quote that. Penal sanction should only be imposed if, in the framework of a strike, violence against person and property, or other serious violations of the ordinary criminal law are committed, and this on the basis of law and regulation punishing such acts, end quote. In respect of child labor, Cambodia has a big pool of young and active labor force. So, there is no labor shortage that requires child labor in Cambodia. But if any enterprise wishes to employ children from 15 to below 18 years old, they shall seek prior permission from the labor inspector. Otherwise, it is deemed considered as a serious violation which will result in strong penalty under the labor law. With regard to minimum age for work, Cambodia fully respects ILO Convention 138. In addition, certain regulations on child labor have been established and strictly enforced. Currently, a new regulation to increase the minimum age for work in the manufacturing sector to 16 years old and to 18 years old for exporting sector is being drafted. On the other hand, promoting decent job and good working conditions is always one of the top priorities in the development strategy of the government. Moreover, our Prime Minister, the previous and the current one, consider the well-being of our workers. For this reason, the former and the present Prime Minister set the schedule to have regular public meetings with workers directly in order to listen to their concerns and respond to their needs. This is very unique, once again. Noticeably, from August 2017 to 2019, the former Prime Minister had a public meeting with workers for 77 times, participated by approximately 1 million workers. Through those meetings, 10 recommendations had been made by the Prime Minister and strictly implemented by the Ministry of Labor. And from September till December 2023, the new Prime Minister has continued this momentum to meet with workers for 10 times, attended by over 170,000 workers. Through those meetings, the Prime Minister has made 6 recommendations to the Ministry of Labor to implement in 2023, and 4 other recommendations for implementation in 2024 and 2025. The 6 recommendations that have been made for 2023 have been successfully implemented by the Ministry of Labor. Currently, all workers in Cambodia receive salary twice a month. And relating to the minimum wage, according to the law on minimum wage, it is fixed regularly once a year. This is very unique for Cambodia, through the National Minimum Wage Council, which is a tripartite body. The criteria for minimum wage setting strictly follow the ILO Convention 26. It is to note that our minimum wage has been increased 19 times from $40 per month in 1997 to $204 per month in 2024. and it was still increased during the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition to other mandatory benefits, workers in the garment, textile, footwear, travel goods, and bag sector receive at least $221 to $232 per month, excluding overtime and other social security benefits. This minimum wage is much higher than some of other countries that are considered as our competitor. For female workers, they are entitled to 120% of wage during the maternity leave and can take leave for 10 minutes, for 15 minutes, 10 times with normal pay plus the allowance from the government of $20 per time for pregnancy check. They are also allowed to leave work 15 minutes earlier than other workers. And after delivering the baby, they are entitled to take leave 4 times for health check and 7 times for vaccinating the baby. Each time, they still get normal pay and allowance from the government of $20. Workers are also entitled to free baby delivery service plus the allowance from the government of $200 for each baby. Regarding the social security protection, Cambodia is currently implementing 3 social security schemes for workers, including workers in the air and maritime transportation, domestic workers, and the self-employed person, under the National Social Security Fund. The occupational risk, health care, and pension scheme were launched in 2008, 2016, and 2022, respectively. The feasibility study is being conducted for the implementation of the unemployment scheme. Unlike in other countries, the social security contribution for healthcare and occupational risk scheme are fully paid by employer. Only the contribution for pension scheme is equally shared by the employer and workers. On the other hand, in November 2023, the government officially launched the Social Security Scheme for Voluntary Healthcare, which is aimed to cover additional 3 million self-employed and dependent of NSSF members, so that the healthcare coverage is extended to over 9 million people to reach our universal health coverage goal. On the other hand, providing a quality job to our people is the priority of the government. To enable them to get this kind of job, the government launched the Tibet training program for 1.5 million people from the poor and vulnerable family in November 2023. And to create the culture of legal compliance, strengthen the effectiveness of alternative dispute resolution mechanism, strengthen the implementation of social security, and increase productivity, the competition program on One Enterprise, One Harmony Community was launched in 2024. Excellency Vice President, due to time limit, I would like to conclude my intervention here with the strong wish and hope that the working group will take the given information and fact into serious consideration and make a just and unbiased observation about the current status of freedom of association as well as labor rights and working conditions in Cambodia. Our concerted effort and achievement should not be undermined. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you all the best. Thank you. Over back to you, Excellency.
Thank you very much, Excellency. I'd like to give the floor to Excellency Long Sonita, Vice President of the Cambodian Human Rights Committee.
Thank you, the head of the delegation. We are humbled by the recommendations received from member states such as the Philippines, Japan, Italy, Lebanon, and Paraguay on ensuring the fundamental human rights to safety and security concerning human rights trafficking. Let me assure you that the fight against human trafficking and forced labor and sexual exploitation remains a top priority for the royal government in this mandate. Constant emphasis have been made in the executions of the legal framework, operational mechanisms, and international corporations are rolled out to ensure that a unified force are concentrated to combat the fight against human trafficking. In fact, the National Committee for Counter-Trafficking has strengthened cooperation with relevant national and international stakeholders, signing about 18 memorandum of understanding and agreements with various partners from 2019 until 2023, and also to amplify the cooperation with many countries, especially between law enforcement agencies that are directly responsible for investigating crimes, including human trafficking. Through the law enforcement from 2019 to 2023, the competent authorities have cracked down on 936 cases related to human trafficking in persons and sexual exploitation. Also arrested 1,258 suspects and sent them to court and rescued 3,139 victims. Its 5-year strategic plan on combating human trafficking for the year 2024 and 2028 is already developed. To mainstream the effort at subnational level, the village, commune, and Sangak safety policy has also been promoted to a national policy with a clear defined areas of needs and to implement the 7 priorities with the anti-human trafficking at both authorities, national and subnational level as one of the core. In fact, in 2022, the Ministry of Social Affairs, Veterans and Youth Rehabilitation has received and sent approximately 2,218 victims for rehabilitation service at partner organization center. Also received a total of 288 victims and vulnerable victims repatriating from various countries by air. Concerning the LGBT community, I will address some of the observations made by the Kingdom of Netherlands and Mexico on equality and discriminations against the marginalized and vulnerable groups. While there does not exist a policy and legal framework governing the rights of LGBT in Cambodia, the provisions of all persons to be protected against all forms of discrimination are set out in the Criminal Code of Cambodia from Article 265 to Article 270. Our core value as a nation should be addressed that we do not criminalize homosexuality, LGBT community, and same-sex marriage. In fact, over 1,000 same-sex couples have been married through traditional ceremony. These facts showcases Cambodia as one of the few states in the world that does not condone imposing criminal liability to LGBT community. In fact, 69 states have outlawed same-sex actions or behaviors, whereas 11 states have provision that would impose or permit death penalty to same-sex relations. Furthermore, Cambodia has also welcomed the UN independent experts on protections against violence and discrimination based on sexual orientations and gender identity, with unfettered access to conduct a human rights assessments on the implementations of our existing national framework and international rights standards. He also highlighted the good practice in this peaceful culture toward LGBT community in Cambodia by stating, and I quote, "Before and during my visit, I did not receive any information of massive or systematic physical violence against the people with whom I spoke or know persons known by them regarding LGBT. The government does not tolerate violence, abuse, and harassment against the marginalized group. While it's true that the HIV rate has been disproportionately high among the LGBT community, it's medically untrue to confine the disease to the LGBT community, and it is harmful in nature in perpetuating discriminations against them. In fact, the Prime Minister Samdech Mahabawatthapradai Honmanait, during his plenary meeting of the Council of Ministers in early March this year, has cautioned the use of inflammatory language that would otherwise direct discrimination toward the community. The plenary meeting is attended by senior high-level officers, provincial governors, and also to broadcast further the message down to the subnational level administration, the positive ideology and the correct terminology when addressing the LGBT community. The royal government has strengthened the law enforcement and the regulations to fight against all forms of discriminations and ensure expanding individual, family, community, and social education for greater recognitions of LGBT rights. To supplement the effort, the government has also taken positive measures in raising awareness by integrating sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expressions, and sexual characteristics, as my colleague from the Ministry of Education has highlighted. In order to transform discriminatory norms through better understanding of diverse sexual orientation, gender identity and expressions, and to advance equality through mainstreaming the rights of vulnerable groups in order to cultivate a right-based mindset, well-informed adult, able to exercise their agency and rights in the future. Parallelly, the Ministry of Women's Affairs has also identified lesbian, bisexual, and transgender women as a priority group in the 3rd National Action Plan on Violence Against Women. As they are the most vulnerable to higher risk of discrimination, stigma, sexual gender-based violence, and by recognizing the intersectionality of their vulnerability in belonging to multiple category of marginalized group, the state can then further integrate an intersectional perspective action plan that could translate normative framework into an all-encompassing comprehensive protection mechanism. LGBT people have continued to exercise their rights and freedom without restriction. Relevant ministries and institutions such as the Cambodian Human Rights Committee have collaborated well with CSO and associations and LGBT community in the advocacy campaign to promote and protect their rights. According to assessments of the Rainbow Community Cambodia organization known as ROC, since 2019, the number of public and their families who have value, respect, and socially recognized the status of LGBT community have significantly increased. For same-sex marriage to be amended in the Civil War, there needs to be more advocacy and promotions and public awareness to increase the level of understanding and acceptance from society and community, so that it would offset the cultural resistance and balance the religious harmony, and at the same time further legal and societal analysis along with the evolving sentiments of our community can be further examined and taken into consideration. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I now return the floor back to the head of the delegation.
Thank you very much. I'd like to give the floor to Madam Vice President.
Thank you, Excellency, and thank you for the delegation for the statements. We will now continue with our interactive dialogue, and I will give the floor to Poland.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Poland thanks Cambodia for the national report and active participation in the fourth cycle of the UPR process. We welcome efforts of Cambodia in alleviating poverty. Poland recommends Cambodia to 1. Promptly investigate all allegations of torture, ill-treatment, and death in custody, and ensure the survivors of torture and ill-treatment, as well as the families of those who have died in custody, have access to remedy and reparations. 2. Release detained human rights defenders, political dissidents, journalists, and media personnel. Drop court cases against them and refrain from harassing or attacking them. 3. Improve access to quality health services, in particular in rural areas and for children with disabilities, children belonging to minority groups and migrant children, and ensure that all health facilities had adequate water, sanitation, and hygiene facilities. We wish Cambodia a successful UPR. I thank you.
I thank Poland for your statement and give the floor to Portugal.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Portugal welcomes the delegation of Cambodia and thanks it for the presentation of its national report. We welcome Cambodia's adoption of the action plan to prevent and respond to violence against children and the national policy for the child protection system. Portugal would like to recommend that Cambodia, 1. Take concrete measures to eliminate specific barriers for girls enrolling and remaining in secondary and tertiary education, including poverty, negative parental attitudes, disability, child marriage, and early pregnancy. 2. Ensure that all legislation on the protection of the rights of persons with disabilities is in compliance with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. 3. Take immediate and effective measures to ensure that all persons, including human rights defenders and journalists, can exercise their rights to freedom of expression and association. Portugal wishes Cambodia a successful review. Thank you.
I thank Portugal for your statement and give the floor to Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The Republic of Korea warmly welcomes the Cambodian delegation and appreciates its efforts and commitment to implement the recommendations made during the third cycle with close cooperation with UN human rights mechanisms, especially OHCHR. My delegation commends continuous reduction of poverty rate, the decline in infant and child mortality rates, and the successful curing rate of tuberculosis in Cambodia. We also acknowledge the progress in establishing a National Human Rights Institute in line with international standards. With this in mind, the Republic of Korea recommends the following. First, continue its efforts to improve the quality of education at all levels, especially in rural areas, and to ensure access to inclusive education for all, including children with disabilities. 2. Continue to take all necessary measures to combat trafficking in persons. Wish Cambodia a successful review.
I thank Republic of Korea for your statement and give the floor to Russian Federation.
Спасибо, госпожа заместитель председателя. Благодарим делегацию Камбоджи за представленный доклад. В позитивном ключе отмечаем шаги правительства страны по выполнению рекомендаций третьего цикла УПО. Приветствуем всесторонние усилия Камбоджи по обеспечению прав и свобод своих граждан, в частности, работу по пересмотру национального законодательства с целью более эффективного инкорпорирования положений международных договоров, участником которых является Королевство, в национальную правовую систему. Рекомендуем продолжить приводить национальную нормативно-правовую базу в соответствии с международными обязательствами страны в области прав человека. Констатируем, что властями Камбоджи уделяется большое внимание вопросам совершенствования систем государственного управления и правосудия, противодействия коррупции, а также создания условий для должного функционирования различных политических сил и институтов гражданского общества. Отмечаем принимаемые руководством страны меры по борьбе с крайней нищетой, обеспечению устойчивого развития и улучшению доступа к здравоохранению и образованию. Рекомендуем Камбодже продолжать эту работу. Благодарю за внимание.
I thank the Russian Federation for your statement and give the floor to Saudi Arabia.
السيد نائب الرئيس، أود في البداية أن أرحب بوفد دولة كمبوديا وأشكرهم على عرضهم الشامل والقيم، ونقدر الجهود المبذولة من قبل كمبوديا من أجل تعزيز وحماية حقوق الإنسان. اطلعت بعثة بلادي على التقرير محل الاستعراض، وترحب بالجهود المبذولة من دولة كمبوديا لتوسيع نطاق إمدادات المياه المأمونة من أجل تحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة. وفي إطار هذا الحوار البناء نوصي بما يلي: أولاً، مواصلة الجهود الرامية لمكافحة الاتجار بالأشخاص. ثانياً، مواصلة التدابير اللازمة لتنفيذ خطة العمل الوطنية للحد من عمل الأطفال. وفي الختام، نتمنى لدولة كمبوديا التوفيق في استعراضها. شكراً السيدة نائب الرئيس.
I thank Saudi Arabia for your statement and give the floor to Senegal.
Merci Madame la Vice-Présidente. La délégation sénégalaise souhaite une chaleureuse bienvenue à la délégation du Cambodge et la remercie pour la représentation de son rapport national au titre de cette 46e session de l'EPU. Ma délégation félicite le Cambodge pour les recommandations acceptées lors de son précédent examen qui vont contribuer à améliorer davantage la pleine jouissance des droits de l'homme. Le Sénégal salue également la coopération fructueuse du gouvernement cambodgien avec le Haut Commissariat des droits de l'homme et l'encourage à poursuivre cette collaboration. Dans un esprit constructif, ma délégation souhaiterait faire les recommandations ci-après. 1. Envisager de ratifier la Convention concernant la lutte contre la discrimination dans le domaine de l'enseignement. 2. Envisager la ratification de la Convention internationale sur la protection des droits de tous les travailleurs migrants et des membres de leur famille. Pour conclure, le Sénégal souhaite plein succès au Cambodge dans la mise en œuvre des recommandations acceptées. Je vous remercie.
I thank Senegal for your statement and give the floor to Serbia.
Madam Vice President, the Republic of Serbia welcomes the delegation of the Kingdom of Cambodia at the UPR session and thanks it for presenting its national report. Serbia commends Cambodia's dedication to the UPR process and its efforts invested in responding to the recommendations from the previous UPR cycle in wide-ranging consultations with public sector and civil society. We welcome in particular the fact that the poverty rate in Cambodia has dropped significantly in the last period due to policies enacted by the Cambodian authorities. We recommend that Cambodia continues with its commitment to achieving universal health coverage for the people. We also recommend that Cambodia continues to take measures and activities to raise public awareness and change social attitudes, mobilize participation, encourage women's empowerment and men's participation in preventing violence against women and children. Serbia wishes Cambodia a successful and fruitful review process.
I thank Serbia for your statement and give the floor to Sierra Leone.
Madam Vice President, Sierra Leone welcomes the distinguished delegation of the Kingdom of Cambodia and thanks them for their presentation. We commend the royal government of its continued engagement and cooperation with the Human Rights Council and its mechanism, and the decision to renew the MOU with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights for further 2 years. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, Sierra Leone recommends the following. 1. ensure refugees can effectively access pathways to Cambodian citizenship or to other forms of permanent status within the country to which they are entitled under the law. Continue engagement and cooperation with human rights mechanisms and special procedures to uphold and promote human rights standards and principles in Cambodia. And 3, take practical steps to the full implementation of the recently enacted law on civil registration, vital statistics and identification to ensure universal access to essential documentation and identity records. Sierra Leone wishes Cambodia a successful fourth cycle review. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
I thank Sierra Leone for your statement and give the floor to Singapore.
Madam Vice President, Singapore extends a warm welcome to the Cambodian delegation. As a close ASEAN neighbour, we commend Cambodia for the progress made since its last review and for its commitment to promote and protect human rights in a manner best suited for its national context. In particular, we note the positive trend of reduction in maternal, child and infant mortality rates. We also welcome the government's steadfast efforts in the fight against tuberculosis. Singapore recommends that Cambodia continue building on existing efforts to improve its public health infrastructure, in particular improving access to maternal services for women and infants. Singapore also welcomes Cambodia's commitment to combating the grave threats of drug consumption and commends the government's efforts in increasing the coverage and access to comprehensive counselling, mental health services and drug detoxification, as well as treatment and rehabilitation. We recommend that Cambodia continue to take a comprehensive approach to ensure its citizens remain protected against the world drug problem. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
I thank Singapore for your statement and give the floor to Slovenia.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Slovenia thanks the delegation of Cambodia for its commitment to the UPR process. Slovenia would like to recommend to Cambodia to ensure that cases of discrimination and violence against women are thoroughly investigated, perpetrators held accountable, and victims provided with protection and remedies. We know that the measures to achieve gender equality in the land sector and promoting women's participation in activities reducing disaster management risks. However, we remain worried about the high unemployment of women in rural areas, limited access to appropriate sexual and reproductive health services, and high numbers of child marriages. We would also like to encourage Cambodia to ensure a free civic space for human rights defenders, political opposition leaders, and journalists to carry out their activities without impediments. I thank you.
I thank Slovenia for your statement and give the floor to Spain.
Muchas gracias, señora vicepresidenta. España da la bienvenida a la delegación de Camboya y agradece su participación en este ejercicio. España felicita al Gobierno de Camboya por la incorporación de la perspectiva de género en recientes iniciativas como la Estrategia Pentagonal para el Crecimiento, el Empleo, la Equidad y la Sostenibilidad. España recomienda al Gobierno de Camboya 1. Reformar la ley sobre violencia doméstica con el fin de aplicar medidas que garanticen la efectiva protección de las mujeres y la elaboración de un marco normativo adecuado que permita garantizar una cuota más elevada de participación femenina en las instituciones públicas. 2. Desarrollar medidas encaminadas a reducir los casos de trabajos forzosos y el tráfico de personas ante los numerosos casos denunciados de trabajadores forzados a trabajar en centros de llamada en línea, donde se ejerce una violencia constante. 3. No adoptar la legislación restrictiva que obliga al registro de los periodistas en el Ministerio de Información, ni el proyecto de código deontológico que limitaría las opiniones críticas, la libertad de expresión, reunión y asociación. España recomienda ratificar la Convención sobre el Estatuto de los Apátridas y la ratificación del segundo protocolo facultativo del Pacto de Derechos Civiles y Políticos. Muchísimas gracias.
I thank Spain for your statement and give the floor to Sri Lanka by video.
Mr. President, Sri Lanka warmly welcomes the delegation of Cambodia and appreciates the presentation made. We commend Cambodia's constructive engagement with the UPR process and progress made following the third UPR cycle. Sri Lanka welcomes the progressive legislative and strategic measures introduced by Cambodia to promote women's and children's rights, including the National Action Plan to Prevent Violence Against Women 2019-2023, National Policy for the Children Protection System, and Action Plan to Prevent and Respond to Violence Against Children. In a constructive spirit, Sri Lanka recommends Cambodia enhance legal protection for children against child labor, strengthen national efforts at combating trafficking in persons, including protection for victims of trafficking, in particular of women and children. We wish Cambodia every success in its UPR engagement. Thank you.
I thank Sri Lanka for your statement and give the floor to Sudan.
السودان يشيد بالتقدم المحرز في مملكة كمبوديا في مجالات ترقية وحماية حقوق الإنسان منذ آخر استعراض. في هذا السياق نرحب بتبني الخطة الوطنية الثالثة لمنع العنف ضد المرأة وخطة العمل الوطنية للحد من عمل الأطفال والاستراتيجية الوطنية للأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة والخطة الاستراتيجية لمكافحة الاتجار بالأشخاص واستراتيجية والخطة الوطنية لمكافحة الفساد. كما نشيد بمبادرات ومجهودات تنفيذ أهداف التنمية المستدامة وعقد الانتخابات العامة في 2023 بنسبة اقتراع كبيرة. نوصي بالآتي: إكمال مجهودات إنشاء المؤسسة الوطنية المستقلة لحقوق الإنسان. 2. مواصلة مجهودات الإصلاح التشريعي والقانوني المتعلق بحقوق الإنسان. نتمنى لكمبوديا كل التوفيق والتقدم المستمر. شكرا السيدة نائبة الرئيس.
I thank Sudan for your statement and give the floor to Sweden.
Madam Vice President, while Sweden acknowledges certain improvements in terms of labor and trade union rights, Sweden is concerned by the human rights situation in Cambodia, not least with regard to civil and political rights such as freedom of expression and assembly. The use of the judiciary to restrict a range of human rights, including for LGBTIQ persons, is also concerning. Sweden would therefore like to make the following recommendations. 1. Hold meaningful consultations with civil society on draft laws which impact freedom of expression, including the draft laws related to cybercrime, cybersecurity, and personal data protection. 2. Ensure that the Arbitration Council is able to maintain its independence and function as an effective national institution to resolve disputes in a timely manner. 3. Ensure the effective inclusion and protection of LGBTIQ persons in relevant laws and policies in order to combat discrimination and gender-based violence, including in schools, the employment sector, healthcare, and in public settings. I thank you.
I thank Sweden for your statement and give the floor to Switzerland.
Madame la Vice-présidente, la Suisse souhaite la bienvenue à la délégation du Cambodge et la remercie pour sa présentation. La Suisse fait les 4 recommandations suivantes. 1. Intensifions les efforts visant à enquêter de manière approfondie, indépendante et impartiale sur les disparitions forcées et à faire la lumière sur le sort réservé aux victimes. 2. Assurer la liberté d'expression et l'indépendance des médias, notamment en abrogeant l'article 305 du Code pénal, en modifiant la loi sur la presse et en adoptant une loi sur l'accès à l'information correspondant aux standards internationaux. 3. Rétablir un environnement propre, libre et ouvert afin que tous les électeurs éligibles puissent librement exercer leur droit de vote et que tous les partis politiques puissent légalement faire campagne et participer aux élections. 4. Renforcer l'indépendance et les compétences de l'unité anticorruption et poursuivre la mise en œuvre de mesures visant à garantir l'indépendance du pouvoir judiciaire. Je vous remercie.
I thank Switzerland for your statement and give the floor to Syrian Arab Republic.
السيدة نائب الرئيس، نرحب بوفد كمبوديا ونشكره على العرض الذي أكد التزام البلاد الثابت بحماية وتعزيز حقوق الإنسان على الصعيد الوطني، بما في ذلك من خلال وضع وتعديل وضمان إنفاذ القوانين ذات الصلة وتوسيع برامج التثقيف حول حقوق الإنسان وتعزيز فرص الحوار والتعاون الدولي. أخذنا علما بالأثر الإيجابي لبرامج التنمية الاجتماعية الاقتصادية ودورها في الحد من الفقر وتحسين مستوى المعيشة وخاصة في المناطق الريفية، ونشجع على الاستمرار في اعتماد وتنفيذ هذه البرامج. ونود أن نتقدم بتوصيتين: أولا، مواصلة الجهود لتحسين الوصول إلى خدمات صحية ذات جودة والنظر في سبل توسيع نطاق التغطية الصحية. ثانيا، الاستمرار في جهود تحسين جودة النظام التعليمي الوطني وتوفير الوصول إلى التعليم للجميع. نتمنى لكمبوديا استعراضا موفقا. شكرا السيدة نائب الرئيس.
I thank the Syrian Arab Republic for your statement and give the floor to Thailand.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Thailand welcomes Cambodia's progress in addressing gender inequality and mainstreaming women's meaningful participation in national development. We also commend efforts made in addressing humanitarian consequences from anti-personal mines. Thailand recommends that Cambodia, 1, intensify its effort in combating human trafficking, including in relation to online scam operations, by effectively implementing related rules and regulations, and enhancing cooperation with all stakeholders at national, regional, and international levels. 2, enhance its efforts in preventing and protecting children from online sexual exploitation and other related risks. And 3, strengthen its healthcare system with a view to promoting universal health coverage, while ensuring those in vulnerable situations are also included. We wish Cambodia a successful review. Thank you.
I thank Thailand for your statement and give the floor to Timor-Leste.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Timor-Leste commends Cambodia's strides in human rights advancement since its last UPR. We note the government's efforts in dealing with issues such as gender equality, improving the quality and accessibility of education, and expanding social protection coverage. We also recognize Cambodia's proactive measures to combat human trafficking, provide support for vulnerable families, and promote indigenous peoples' cultural traditions. In the spirit of a constructive dialogue, Timor-Leste recommends that Cambodia continues efforts towards the establishment of a national human rights institution by finalizing the draft law on the organization and functioning of the NHRC, consider streamlining the process of obtaining identity documents and ensure universal birth registration, and considers expanding access to education for all, including both Cambodian citizens and non-Cambodian citizens. We wish Cambodia a successful review. Thank you.
I thank Timor-Leste for your statement and give the floor to Togo.
Madame la vice-présidente, la délégation togolaise remercie les délégués du Royaume du Cambodge pour leur rapport sur la situation des droits de l'homme dans leur pays. Le Togo salue la constante collaboration du gouvernement cambodgien avec les mécanismes des droits de l'homme des Nations Unies, notamment en ce qui concerne la mise en œuvre des recommandations acceptées du 3e cycle de l'EPU. Il importe de se féliciter en particulier des mesures prises pour la promotion des droits à l'éducation et à la santé, des droits des femmes, des droits des enfants, des handicapés et des populations autochtones. Les efforts déployés par les autorités du Royaume en vue du renforcement de l'indépendance et de l'autorité du pouvoir judiciaire méritent également d'être soulignés. Toutefois, dans un esprit constructif, le Togo recommande au Cambodge de parachever le processus engagé pour le renforcement de l'Institution nationale des droits de l'homme conformément aux principes de Paris. Enfin, la délégation togolaise souhaite plein succès au Cambodge dans la mise en œuvre des recommandations issues du présent examen. Je vous remercie.
I thank Togo for your statement and give the floor to Turkey.
Madam Vice President, Turkey welcomes the delegation of Cambodia and thanks them for their presentation and the report. We commend the progress made by Cambodia in the implementation of Sustainable Development Goal, as well as its efforts towards the reduction of poverty and increasing the coverage of social protection mechanism. Turkey supports Cambodia's effort for a smooth graduation from LDC status and highlight the importance of continuation of assistance provided by the international community also during the post-graduation period. We commend Cambodia's effort and achievements in promoting religious harmony. We welcome the positive and constructive engagement of government of Cambodia with the human rights mechanism, especially their cooperation with the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Cambodia. We note with appreciation the progress towards creating a national human rights institution in compliance with the Paris Principle. In a constructive spirit, we recommend Cambodia, 1, to continue its effort to reform its public education and to make primary education compulsory and accessible to all. 2, to maintain its effort to promote and protect human rights. We wish Cambodia a very successful review. Thank you.
I thank Turkey for your statement and give the floor to Ukraine.
Thank you, Madam President, Vice President.
Ukraine welcomes the delegation of Cambodia and thanks for the presentation of its national report. We positively note Cambodia's efforts to implement recommendations received during the previous UPR cycle and the progress achieved in the field of human rights protection, which include, inter alia, the implementation of Health Strategic Plan and National Action Plan to prevent violence against women. In the constructive spirit, we would like to make the following recommendations. First, to ratify critical international human rights instruments, including but not limited to ICCPR OP1 and ICCPR OP2. Second, to prioritize measures to improve access to quality health services, in particular in rural areas, and for children with disabilities, children belonging to minority groups, and migrant children. And third, to ensure that cases of gender-based discrimination and violence against women were thoroughly investigated, perpetrators were prosecuted and adequately punished, and victims were provided with remedies. We wish Cambodia a very successful review. Thank you.
I thank Ukraine for your statement and give the floor to United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The UK recognises Cambodia's progress on social and cultural rights, including its commitment to social protection, climate change, education and healthcare. But we are concerned by increasing restrictions on civil and political rights, particularly the use of the judicial system to restrict independent media and opposition voices. The UK welcomes steps taken by Cambodia to tackle online scamming, but we remain concerned by the inconsistent application of law enforcement. We recommend that Cambodia, 1, take steps to protect indigenous people's rights in the implementation of economic land concessions and planned hydropower dam construction, including through meaningful prior consultation, coherent resettlement schemes and adequate compensation. 2, introduce and amend existing legislation to recognise marriage equality for same-sex couples. And 3, strengthen civil society participation and freedom of expression by repealing decisions to block independent media websites and by conducting meaningful civil society consultation on proposed legislative changes. Thank you.
I thank the UK for your statement and give the floor to the United Republic of Tanzania.
Madam Vice President, the United Republic of Tanzania welcomes the delegation of Kingdom of Cambodia to the Universal Periodic Review and commends the Cambodia for successfully holding free and fair, credible, successful general election in July 2023. We applaud the government of Cambodia for launching a national action plan to combat child labor, which focused on policy enforcement, interventions, and awareness campaigns, as well as launching the National Disability Strategic Plan for 2019-2023, which uphold the rights of persons with disabilities and promote inclusion in line with international conventions and development policies. Madam Vice President, in the spirit of constructive dialogue, we recommend the Kingdom of Cambodia to continue with its spirit in the implementation of the recommendations proposed in this review to continue strengthening state institutions, attainment of sustainable development, including inclusive and equitable development for the people of the Kingdom of Cambodia. The United Republic of Tanzania wishes the Cambodia a successful review. I thank you.
I thank United Republic of Tanzania for your statement and give the floor to United States of America.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The United States welcomes the delegation from Cambodia. We urge Cambodia to fully respect civil and political rights and to restore multi-party democracy. In the spirit of constructive engagement, we recommend that Cambodia, 1, repeal election law amendments that unduly restrict political participation and limit the exercise of freedoms of expression, peaceful assembly, and association. 2, ensure pending draft laws are revised to comply with Cambodia's international human rights obligations before they are enacted, including the laws on cybercrime, cybersecurity, and access to information. 3, cease judicial harassment of civil society and independent media and release those unjustly detained for exercising their human rights and fundamental freedoms, including Kum Sokha and Sang Terry. 4, investigate and prosecute traffickers and officials who are complicit in forced labor and online scam operations and provide victims with support. I thank you.
I thank the United States for your statement and give the floor to Uruguay.
Gracias, señora vicepresidenta. Uruguay da la bienvenida a la delegación de Camboya y le desea éxito en este cuarto ciclo de examen. Uruguay constructivamente recomienda: 1. Modificar la legislación nacional a efectos de que esté en consonancia con la Convención de los Derechos del Niño, prestando especial atención a las disposiciones establecidas en el Código Penal y al sistema judicial juvenil. 2. Adoptar medidas efectivas para combatir y sancionar la discriminación y violencia por motivo de orientación sexual e identidad de género. 3. Redoblar esfuerzos para erradicar la discriminación contra las mujeres en el plano jurídico y poner fin a las prácticas nocivas y estereotipos discriminatorios de las que son víctimas las mujeres camboyanas. Muchas gracias.
I thank Uruguay for your statement and give the floor to Vanuatu.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Vanuatu welcomes the delegation of Cambodia and thanks the delegation for the presentation of its national report. Vanuatu congratulates Cambodia for its commendable effort on its progress toward achieving universal access to safe and affordable drinking water. In a constructive spirit, Vanuatu recommends Cambodia: 1. To adopt environmentally friendly, responsible practices on the formulation of impactful policies to moderate the effect of climate change. 2. To improve the lives of indigenous communities through land rights recognition, development programs, and multilingual education. Vanuatu wishes the delegation of Cambodia a successful UPR. I thank you, Madam Vice President.
I thank Vanuatu for your statement and give the floor to Venezuela.
Gracias, señora vicepresidenta. Damos una cordial bienvenida a la ilustre delegación del Reino de Camboya y valoramos la implementación de las recomendaciones aceptadas en su tercer EPO. Nos complacen los avances y logros significativos en la reducción de la pobreza, mejora de la calidad de la educación, ampliando el acceso para todos y del desarrollo rural para aliviar el nivel de vida de la población. Recomendamos constructivamente continuar avanzando en el trabajo para el establecimiento de una institución nacional de derechos humanos conforme a los principios de París. Continuar la lucha contra la trata de personas y explotación sexual, así como su exitosa campaña de sensibilización y prevención. Persistir en sus esfuerzos en la reducción de la pobreza y el mejoramiento del nivel de vida en el país. Éxito en su EPO. Muchas gracias.
I thank Venezuela for your statement and give the floor to Vietnam.
Madam Vice President, Vietnam extends a warm welcome to the delegation of Cambodia. We appreciate Cambodia's continued effort to enhance socio-economic development, eliminate poverty, and raise people's living standards. We also commend Cambodia's efforts to advance gender equality and empower women socially and economically through various policies and action plans. In a spirit of constructive dialogue, Vietnam makes two recommendations to Cambodia. First, continue to enhance its efforts and policies to improve access to work, particularly for young persons, women, people with disabilities, and people living in rural areas. Second, continue its efforts to expand access to healthcare services and health insurance system, aiming at the goal of universal health coverage. Vietnam wishes Cambodia every success with this EPR cycle. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
I thank Vietnam for your statement and give the floor to Yemen by video.
السيد الرئيس، نرحب برئيس وفد كمبوديا الموقر ومرافقيه ونعبر عن التقدير للعرض المفصل والغيب الذي قدمه واستعرض فيه ما انجزته حكومة كمبوديا في مجال حقوق الإنسان، حيث تعمل الحكومة على تسريع إصلاح الحوكمة وتحديث مؤسسات الدولة والتنمية المستدامة ومكافحة الفساد. كما تواصل حكومة كمبوديا إيلاء الاهتمام لتعزيز وحماية حقوق الإنسان من خلال إنفاذ القوانين والتثقيف حول القانون وحقوق الإنسان وتعزيز تنفيذ جميع التوصيات في مجال حقوق الإنسان التي قبلتها وتوسيع التعاون مع الآليات الوطنية والإقليمية وآليات الأمم المتحدة لحقوق الإنسان وكذا مع منظمات المجتمع المدني. إن وفد بلادي يثمن كافة ثمن الجهود ثمن جهود الحكومة الكمبودية حكومة كمبوديا الموقرة في مجال حقوق الإنسان، ويوصيها بالاستمرار على مواصلة تلك الجهود لتفعيل دور اللجنة الوطنية لحقوق الإنسان وتحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة. وشكرا.
Thank Yemen for your statement and give the floor to Zambia.
Madam Vice President, we welcome the delegation of Cambodia to the fourth cycle of the UPR. We congratulate them for the presentation of their national report. We commend Cambodia for the efforts made in accelerating governance reform, modernization of state institutions, and sustainable economic development. Zambia wishes to recommend the following to the delegation of Cambodia. 1. Strengthen the independence and accountability of the anti-corruption unit and establish the whistleblower regime with adequate protection for whistleblowers in line with international best practice. 2. Improve conditions of detention in compliance with the Nelson Mandela rules, particularly with respect to air quality standards, access to water, and access to electricity. 3. Establish an independent broadcasting authority, setting clear rules for allocating and revoking broadcasting licenses. As we conclude, wish Cambodia a successful review. I thank you.
I thank Zambia for your statement and give the floor to Zimbabwe.
Madam Vice President, Zimbabwe welcomes the distinguished delegation of the Kingdom of Cambodia and congratulates them on their national report. We commend Cambodia's effort in implementing the recommendations from previous UPR cycles, which has contributed to strengthening national human rights protection systems and promoting the rights of the citizens. In support of Cambodia's vision to transition to developing country status by 2029, Zimbabwe respectively makes the following recommendations. 1. Continue to improve access to quality health services, water, sanitation, and hygiene facilities, in particular in rural areas. 2. Implement measures to eliminate barriers faced by girls in enrolling and remaining in school at secondary and tertiary levels, and take action to address the persistence of discriminatory stereotypes against women and girls. And 3. Take action to improve access to justice for all, including minorities in remote areas. We wish Cambodia a successful fourth review cycle. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
I thank Zimbabwe for your statement and give the floor to
Merci Madame la Vice-Présidente. Ma délégation souhaite la bienvenue à la délégation du Royaume du Cambodge et la remercie pour la présentation de son rapport national. L'Algérie accueille avec satisfaction les initiatives du gouvernement cambodgien visant la promotion des droits fondamentaux, notamment en ce qui concerne la réduction des inégalités et du taux de pauvreté. Elle se félicite particulièrement des efforts du Cambodge visant à garantir un accès universel au système sanitaire et éducatif. Dans un esprit de coopération constructive, l'Algérie recommande au Royaume du Cambodge 1. De poursuivre sa coopération avec les mécanismes onusiens. 2. Œuvrer à l'élaboration d'un système de sécurité sociale à même de garantir une gouvernance sociale universelle et non discriminatoire. Et 3. Poursuivre ses efforts visant l'éradication des violences faites aux femmes, la promotion des droits et du statut des femmes à travers la mise en œuvre effective de politiques d'égalité des sexes dans tous les domaines. Nous souhaitons le plein succès au Royaume du Cambodge dans cet examen. Je vous remercie.
I thank Algeria for your statement and give the floor to Argentina.
Gracias, Vicepresidenta. Damos la bienvenida a la delegación de Camboya y le agradecemos la presentación de su informe. La Argentina recomienda 1. Atendiendo a nuestras recomendaciones de 2019, adoptar todas las medidas necesarias para el libre ejercicio de la libertad de expresión de los periodistas y de la población en general y cesar su persecución. 2. En seguimiento a nuestras recomendaciones de 2019, tomar medidas para garantizar los derechos de quienes trabajan para proteger y promover los derechos humanos, en particular de los defensores de derechos humanos. 3. Adoptar medidas para luchar contra y prevenir el trabajo infantil y la trata, así como sancionar a los responsables de tales abusos. Muchas gracias, Vicepresidenta.
I thank Argentina for your statement and give the floor to Armenia.
Madam Vice President, Armenia welcomes the delegation of Cambodia to its fourth UPR and thanks for the presentation of the national report. Armenia welcomes Cambodia's implementation of the National Action Plan on the reduction of child labor and the elimination of the worst forms of child labor. We encourage Cambodia to continue its child protection-related policies and would like to recommend considering ratification of the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child on a Communications Procedure. We also would like to recommend ratifying the optional protocol to the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. We wish Cambodia a successful UPR review. I thank you.
I thank Armenia for your statement and give the floor to Australia.
Thank you, Vice President. Australia commends Cambodia's progress on gender equality, social inclusion and LGBTQIA+ rights. We welcome the one-stop referral centres for gender-based violence victims and development of a national action plan to prevent violence against women. Australia remains concerned by Cambodia's restricted civic and political space. Australia recommends Cambodia, 1, permit genuine political competition, expand civic space and uphold rights to freedom of expression, association and assembly. 2, ensure laws and their implementation are consistent with international obligations, including by reviewing the law on associations and non-governmental associations and the law on trade unions, and repealing 2023 amendments to the law on elections and 2017 amendments to the law on political parties. 3, continue positive progress to full equality for LGBTQIA+ persons, including moving toward legalising same-sex marriage. I thank you.
I thank Australia for your statement, and I now give the floor back to the delegation of Cambodia to address observations and comments that have been raised so far. So you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President, and allow me to thank all the members of the United Nations for your recommendations and comments. And with my delegation, His Excellency Bang Rasi, Vice Chair of the Council of Jurists of the Ministry of Interior, will address the topic on the freedom of the press, freedom of expression, and civic space in general. The right to information is guaranteed and protected in Cambodia through international and domestic legal frameworks. It is enshrined in Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as well as Article 19 of the ICCPR. Our Constitution also enshrines this right under the Article 41, guaranteeing the right to freedom of expression. We received a recommendation with regard to law on access to information. This draft law is soon to be finalized. It has been submitted to the Council of Jurists of the Office of the Council of Ministers after receiving revisions from the Ministry of Justice and inputs from UN agencies and civil society organizations. More than 2,000 media outlets and 10,000 journalists, including those critical of the royal government, have been operating freely in analog and digital forms without prior censorship. In 2023, Cambodia has a total of more than 11 million registered accounts of social media users, equating to 65% of the total population, allowing them to access a diverse range of information as well as voice their public opinions freely without limitation. With this progress, the royal government reiterates its stance that while the government supports free and independent press, it must also combat the bombardment of disinformation with malicious intent, politically incentivized to misinform and incite hatred and violence, disrupting social stability while undermining the principles of human rights and fundamental freedoms. Such actions must be viewed as a violation of law. Accountability and responsibility must go hand in hand with the exercise of rights. On the topic of the law on associations and non-governmental organizations, Cambodia recognizes the instrumental roles they play in the advancement of social accountability, good governance, protection and promotion of human rights, as well as sustainable development. Cambodia provides a vibrant space for CSOs. Over 6,000 national and international NGOs are currently registered in Cambodia. Cambodia is strongly committed to promote genuine partnership with CSOs in all aspects of social development a working group has been established under the leadership of the Ministry of Interior to consult regularly with hundreds of CSOs in addressing challenges and fostering effective government CSO partnership, as well as to amend the law on association and NGOs at the CSO's request. The working group has conducted the second phase of consultation with CSOs on this amendment on the law on association and NGOs. And as mentioned, Cambodia respects and supports the activities of social activists, trade unionists, and human rights defenders. Just like CSOs, they play a role in the advancement of social accountability, good governance, protection, promotion of human rights, and sustainable development. Every person is entitled to these rights and freedoms, but it also comes with responsibilities to perform roles, duties, and obligations in accordance with the law. And when activities become criminal and threaten social order and impede public interests, perpetrators must be held accountable. Cambodia firmly believes in a liberal multi-party democracy system enshrined in our constitution. This is reflected in the election of the 7th legislature of the National Assembly last year, which was conducted in a free, fair, peaceful, and transparent manner with a high voter turnout of 84.5%, surpassing the previous 4 national polls since 2003, from more than 8.2 million voters casting their ballots to choose among the 18 contending political parties. There were thousands of observers, including 422 foreign observers representing 65 countries, international organizations, foreign governments, diplomatic circles, and Cambodia diaspora communities. It was also monitored by nearly 60,000 political parties' agents and 90,000 independent national observers who attest to the transparency process. I now would like to give the floor to Excellency Nyat Sakarin, Secretary of State from the Ministry of Justice.
I would like to thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. I would like to iterate and update the following point. Before the achievement full-pace national unity, territorial integrity through the win-win policy of Samdech Akam Hasan Abedi Hun Sen, Cambodia used to be a war-torn, economically sanctioned and isolated country, known as a killing field. Commendable success of the subsequent implementation of triangular strategy, the 4-phase rectangular strategy are the result of the regional government's absolute effort to put national and public interests above all else, and to implement regular reforms with the support from development partner and stakeholders, as well as active participation of the people from all walks of life. This effort and participation have also laid a solid foundation for Cambodia to firmly maintain peace, political stability, strengthen its ownership over the nation's destiny, and promote the prosperity of people to this day. Cambodian firmly safeguarded sovereignty, social order, securities, social safety, and political stability by firming adherence to principle of rule of law and liberal multi-party democracy, strengthen internal unity, successful throwing various plots of overthrown the legitimate government, safeguarding the nation from descending into chaos, responding to external crisis as well as global pandemic, COVID-19, and maintaining the macroeconomic stability. Madam Vice President, Mr. Hazel Delegate, Chief of Delegate, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, we do always accept all constructive and collaborative criticism, recommendation for making our country better and improve in all aspects, particularly for promoting and protecting human rights and human dignity for our beloved people. However, we could not accept any comment that is misleading, political based, ungrounded, and do not reflect the reality on the ground. To respond to advanced questions made by Belgium, Germany, UK, and comments put forward by certain countries such as Luxembourg, Italy, Ireland, Norway, Japan, Malta, New Zealand, and Poland, and also as well as United States of America regarding impartiality and independence of magistracy, I would like to make the following comment. For guaranteeing and strengthening the judiciary and independence of the court and uphold the respect of the rule of law for all, Cambodian put into implementation of a comprehensive framework for enacting the 3 key laws: law on organization and functioning of the judiciary, the law on status of judge and prosecutor, and the law on the organization and functioning of the Supreme Council of Magistracy. aiming to strengthening the discipline and ethic and professionalism of judge and prosecutor. Judicial power is an independent and no organ of the legislative power or executive power could interfere with the work of the judiciary power, as enshrined in our Constitution. All investigation of any type of crimes, criminal offences, from drugs crime, human trafficking, exploitation offence, sexual abuse, etc., have been seriously and rigorously investigated based on the evidence and in compliance with the Criminal Procedure Code and law enforcement. Like with other country and legal system in the world prescribed, the freedom of expression is limited to the respect of the rights of others. The exercise of democratic rights and freedom could not be at the expense of the rule of law, and I would like to iterate that this principle must be equal applied to everyone, regardless of their background and walk of life. The social affiliation or status as a political or ideological or partisan activist or units could not be served or claim for the privilege and immunity or impunity for his or her commitment of any criminal offences or misdemeanor prescribed by the law. Legal actions against any political party or individual that committed a criminal offence, such as treason and conspiracy or broke the law, was the normal process in any democratic state. Adhering to principle of the rule of law and aiming to strengthen the process of democracy and safeguard peace and stability, which were the basic for our long-term and sustainable socio-economic development. Acts of treason, espionage, and conspiracy with a foreign power that advocated the overthrow of a legitimate government were subject to severe punishment under the law of all countries, and Cambodia was not exception. Honorable Madam Vice President, His Excellency, Head of Delegate, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, with successful achievement as provided in the national report, and by opening remark and intervention by our colleagues and commented by the most esteemed members in this morning, we do not stop here. We have to overcome new challenge in challenge of modus operandi of the crime commission by extreme group and of transnational crime due to development of technology. To aim making Cambodia a civilized country by realizing the Cambodian Vision 2050, few commitments among others such as liberal society, sustainable everlasting peace, political stability, strong public order across respect of the rule of law. The Royal Government continue to focus on prioritize, among others, enhancing and strengthening the effectiveness of law and justice system. In this respect, further to our national report submit to the Human Rights Councils. I would like to highlight a bit on some important further progress of legal and judicial reform, particularly in the new mandate of the government in four main areas. Development alternative dispute resolution. Now we have a new body in competent existing dispute resolution mechanism in the country, aiming to promote the quality, effectiveness, and swiftness of dispute resolution through out-of-court mediation for the purpose of reducing backlog of the case in the court, drawing dispute resolution service closer to the people and local level, and ensuring harmonization and justice in history. The nationality has been begun to accept and address the complaint from March 1 to 2024. Second, improvement court system. The Ministry has been launched two important campaigns simultaneously. The first campaign is for the promotion and expedition of the dispute resolution court, and the second one is a campaign for the investigation and resolution of irregularity in the court. The investigation and resolution of irregularity in court, which aim to finding justice for the people, and as well as promoting transparency, integrity, and fairness in enforcement of law and executive court of proceeding and decision. The third, legal and judicial reform. A new steering committee for judicial reform has been restructured in order to serve as a mechanism to guide, to mediate and promote the implementation of justice system. Reform touches us in according for the Royal Government political program. In addition to the strategy plan for 10 years, we in draft 5 strategic objectives: promoting the quality, effectiveness of law and justice, promoting the quality of effectiveness of judicial system, promoting the effectiveness of alternative dispute resolution mechanism, promoting the legal aid and legal services, and promote the capacity human capital development in justice sector. The fourth, improving legal framework pertaining to justice sector. There are several laws in finalizing. These include the law on notary, draft law on bailiff, draft law on the court clerk, draft law on commercial court, draft law on labor court, and so on. The working group for studying and reviewing the four main law for justice sector was established to improve effectiveness and the quality of the law to ensure the consistency, legal harmonization, development of the digitalization, and new development of the society. The four main laws are criminal code, criminal procedure code, civil code, and civil procedure. To conclude, I would like to thank and wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency. I'd like to give the floor now back to Madam Vice President.
Thank you, Excellency, and the delegation for the statements. We will now continue with our interactive dialogue, and I will give the floor to Azerbaijan.
Madam Vice President, Azerbaijan warmly welcomes the delegation of the Kingdom of Cambodia and thanks for the presentation of its national report. We welcome Cambodia's commitment to the UPR process and the progress made in protecting and promoting of human rights since last review. We applaud the legislative and policy measures in a number of areas, including the launch of the National Disability Strategic Plan 2019-2023 and efforts in promoting of the rights of persons with disabilities, as well as the execution of the National Strategic Plan of Anti-Corruption by Cambodia. In a constructive spirit, we offer Cambodia following recommendations. 1. Continue taking actions in combating corruption, including through education, prevention, and law enforcement. 2. Continue its efforts to promote inclusion and support for persons with disabilities. In conclusion, we wish Cambodia a very successful review. I thank you.
Thank Azerbaijan for your statement and give the floor to Bahrain by video.
Mr. President, the Kingdom of Bahrain welcomes the delegation of the Kingdom of Cambodia and thanks it for the presentation of its national report, and we recognize Cambodia's ongoing efforts to review legislations and implement legal reforms in accordance with international human rights obligations. In the spirit of positive dialogue, my delegation wishes to make the following recommendations. 1. Continue its efforts to protect labor rights, particularly in the garment industry, which employs a large portion of the workforce. 2. Consider enhancing legal framework in order to prevent and combat all forms of discrimination against women. We wish Cambodia success in this UPR session. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Bahrain and give the floor to Bangladesh.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Bangladesh welcomes the distinguished delegation of Cambodia and thanks their presentation of national report. We recognize the steps taken by Cambodia to implement the recommendations from its last UPR. We acknowledge Cambodia's significant progress and achievements in poverty reduction, rural development, and infrastructure improvements. In spirit of cooperation, Bangladesh offers the following recommendations to Cambodia. 1. Continue efforts to establish a national human rights institution in accordance with Paris principles. 2. Take further measures to combat human trafficking by implementing its national strategic plan for counter trafficking in persons. And 3. Intensify efforts to prioritize education, improve teaching quality, and expand infrastructure to ensure inclusive and quality education for all. We wish Cambodia success in its review. I thank you.
I thank Bangladesh for your statement and give the floor to Belarus.
Благодарю, госпожа вице-председатель. Приветствуем уважаемую делегацию Камбоджи. Отмечаем нацеленность и конкретные и значительные результаты в работе правительства по обеспечению социально-экономического прогресса, социальной поддержки уязвимых категорий населения, расширению доступа к качественному образованию и медицинским услугам. Предлагаем следующие рекомендации. Первое. Продолжать совершенствование системы защиты прав детей, в том числе в рамках национального плана действий по сокращению детского труда, ликвидации наихудшего форм детского труда на 2016-2025 годы и других программных национальных документов. Второе. Продолжать реализацию мер по борьбе с торговлей людьми и защите жертв, в том числе путем укрепления потенциала Национального комитета по борьбе с торговлей людьми. Третье. Продолжать меры по обеспечению прав лиц с инвалидностью и других уязвимых категорий населения. Желаем делегации успешного прохождения УПО. Благодарю за внимание.
I thank Belarus and give the floor to Belgium.
Madam Vice President, Belgium congratulates Cambodia with recent progress on social protection. Nevertheless, Belgium believes more can be achieved and recommends the government of Cambodia to amend the law on trade unions in consultation with workers, trade unions, and other stakeholders to bring it into full compliance with ILO Convention 87 and 98. Investigate all cases of violence against journalists, human rights defenders, environmental defenders, civil society members, political opposition leaders attacked, harassed, or intimidated for exercising their right to freedom of expression, and release those detained on this basis. Develop a national action plan to prevent child marriage and teenage pregnancy and allocate appropriate resources for its implementation. I thank you.
I thank Belgium for your statement and give the floor to Bhutan.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Bhutan welcomes the delegation of Cambodia to the 4th UPR cycle and thanks the delegation for the report. We note the measures to promote and protect human rights, including the ongoing efforts in establishing a national human rights institution, the launch of the strategy for growth, employment, equity, and efficiency, and the focus on accelerating progress towards achieving gender equality and women's empowerment, as well as the elimination of all forms of violence against women and girls. We commend Cambodia for the significant reduction in poverty rate and welcome the launch of the various programs, including infrastructure development to improve the living standards, especially in rural areas. While noting the concerted efforts, we would like to recommend the following. 1. Continue efforts in implementing the National Disability Strategy and consider enacting a law on rights of persons with disabilities. 2. Continue its efforts in combating trafficking in persons through effective implementation of the law on suppression of human trafficking and sexual exploitation. We wish the delegation a successful review. I thank you.
I thank Bhutan for your statement and give the floor to Bolivia by video.
Bolivia da la bienvenida a la distinguida delegación de Cambodia. Agradecemos la presentación de su cuarto informe nacional, así como su involucramiento constructivo con el EPO. Saludamos sus políticas relativas a la inscripción de los derechos de uso de las tierras de pueblos indígenas, así como su enfoque de igualdad de género en la política de tierras. Saludamos también su programa de educación multilingüe para niños y niñas indígenas. Bolivia respetuosamente recomienda: 1. Considerar la ratificación de la Convención Internacional sobre la protección de los derechos de todos los trabajadores migratorios y de sus familiares y el protocolo facultativo al Pacto Internacional de Derechos Económicos, Sociales y Culturales. 2. Proseguir reforzando su marco normativo y de política pública para garantizar los derechos económicos, sociales y culturales de la población, con énfasis en pueblos indígenas. 3. Continuar las medidas de reducción de la pobreza para mejorar la calidad de vida de toda la población, incluyendo las zonas rurales. Y 4. Seguir fortaleciendo su normativa y políticas públicas de igualdad de género y lucha contra la discriminación hacia las mujeres, así como la participación y representación de mujeres en posiciones de liderazgo. Le deseamos al gobierno de Camboya mucho éxito en su cuarto examen periódico universal. Muchas gracias.
I thank Bolivia for your statement and give the floor to Brazil.
Vice President, Brazil welcomes the delegation of Cambodia. We commend the country for the significant advances in eradicating poverty. We stress Cambodia's progress in early childhood development and primary education, alongside initiatives aimed at encouraging girls to attend school. In a constructive spirit, Brazil recommends Cambodia: 1. To adopt measures to enforce legislation on human trafficking and to develop and implement, in collaboration with international organizations and affected countries, protocols for the rescue and protection of victims. And 2. To take into consideration the right to privacy on its draft legislations about internet, cyberspace, and the digital environment. We encourage Cambodia to incorporate mechanisms for consulting local communities and indigenous people, as well as to protect their rights related to their lands and to the resources of their territories. Brazil wishes Cambodia a successful review. I thank you.
I thank Brazil for your statement and give the floor to Brunei Darussalam.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Brunei warmly welcomes the delegation of Cambodia to Geneva and thanks them for the presentation of their national report. Firstly, we commend Cambodia in implementing the recommendations made from previous UPR cycles. It complements the government's ongoing effort for governance reform, modernization of state institutions, as well as sustainable and equitable development. Furthermore, Brunei recognizes Cambodia's commitment to public health and the well-being of its people through national policies and action plans to address universal health coverage. In the spirit of constructive engagement, we propose 2 recommendations. 1. Continue to intensify efforts for the implementation of the SDGs, especially those related to quality and accessibility to education. And 2, further strengthen, streamline, and coordinate activities related to mental health. Madam Vice President, Brunei wishes Cambodia a successful review. Thank you.
I thank Brunei for your statement and give the floor to Bulgaria.
Madam Vice President, Bulgaria welcomes the delegation of Cambodia. We commend the adoption of national plans in key domains such as healthcare, violence against women, and child labor. Bulgaria makes the following recommendations to Cambodia. 1. Introduce legislative amendments to further enhance the protection of victims of sexual and gender-based violence and ensure that cases of gender-based discrimination and violence against women, including domestic violence, are thoroughly investigated. The perpetrators are actively prosecuted and appropriately punished, and victims are provided with remedies. 2. Ensure the effective enforcement of existing domestic legislation as regards to trafficking of human beings and to provide adequate protection for victims of trafficking, in particular of women and children. And 3, pursue efforts to improve the functioning of the national education system in order to provide quality inclusive education to all children and to increase the enrollment of completion rates and reduce dropout rates at the secondary level. We wish the delegation of Cambodia a successful review. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
I thank Bulgaria for your statement and give the floor to Burkina Faso.
Merci, Madame la Vice-Présidente. Le Burkina Faso souhaite la chaleureuse bienvenue à la délégation du Royaume du Cambodge et la remercie pour la présentation de son rapport national. Ma délégation salue les efforts consentis par le gouvernement du Cambodge en vue d'éradiquer le travail des enfants et d'améliorer la condition des femmes et des filles victimes de violences. Nous nous réjouissons particulièrement des efforts déployés dans la lutte contre la traite des êtres humains grâce à la mise en œuvre du plan stratégique national de lutte contre la traite et la création d'un comité national y relatif. Dans un esprit de dialogue constructif, nous formulons à la délégation du Cambodge les recommandations suivantes. 1. Poursuivre ses efforts en vue de l'abolition totale de la traite des êtres humains, en particulier chez les enfants. 2. Adhérer aux conventions relatives au statut des apatrides et sur la réduction des cas d'apatridie. Et 3. Ratifier le protocole facultatif se rapportant à la convention relative aux droits des personnes handicapées. Pour terminer, ma délégation souhaite au Cambodge un examen couronné de succès. Je vous remercie.
I thank Burkina Faso for your statement and give the floor to Cameroon.
Merci Madame la Vice-Présidente. Le Cameroun souhaite une chaleureuse bienvenue à la délégation du Cambodge et la félicite pour son rapport national. Mon pays note avec satisfaction des progrès positifs réalisés par le Cambodge en matière de promotion et de protection des droits de l'homme depuis l'examen de son rapport au titre du 3e cycle. Il en est ainsi en particulier de la ratification de la Convention internationale pour la protection de toutes les personnes contre les disparitions forcées et des démarches entreprises avec les parties prenantes concernées sous l'assistance du Haut Commissariat et du Forum Asie-Pacifique pour la mise en place d'une institution nationale des droits de l'homme. Dans une démarche constructive, la délégation camerounaise formule les recommandations suivantes. 1. Accentuer la lutte contre toutes les formes de discrimination, notamment à l'égard des femmes, des personnes vivant avec un handicap et les minorités ethniques. 2. Poursuivre et faire aboutir le processus de création d'une institution nationale des droits de l'homme conforme aux principes de Paris. Le Cameroun souhaite au Cambodge un examen périodique universel couronné de succès. Je vous remercie.
I thank Cameroon for your statement and give the floor to Canada.
Merci, Madame la Vice-Présidente, et merci à la délégation du Cambodge pour la présentation de votre rapport national. Le Canada demeure profondément préoccupé par la répression continue des voix dissidentes au Cambodge, exacerbée par les élections de 2023 et qui malheureusement se poursuit en 2024. Le Canada recommande qu'au Cambodge, 1. Permette à tous les partis politiques, aux médias indépendants, aux syndicats indépendants et à la société civile de fonctionner librement et de garantir leurs droits et libertés tels qu'ils sont protégés par la Constitution. 2. Mettre en œuvre des mécanismes de protection responsables et transparents pour prévenir et contester les expulsions foncières illégales et l'utilisation légale des terres protégées sur le plan environnemental. 3. Continuer à progresser en vue de légaliser le mariage entre les personnes de même sexe. Et 4. Accroître la représentation de groupes marginalisés, y compris les femmes, dans les institutions gouvernementales. Je vous remercie.
I thank Canada for your statement and give the floor to Chile.
Gracias, señora vicepresidenta. Felicitamos a Camboya por la puesta en marcha de su Plan Estratégico Nacional de Discapacidad 2019-2023 y la adopción del tercer Plan de Acción Nacional para prevenir la violencia contra las mujeres. Con miras a seguir avanzando en el respeto y promoción de los derechos humanos, nuestro país respetuosamente recomienda: 1. Ratificar el segundo protocolo facultativo del Pacto Internacional de Derechos Civiles y Políticos destinado a abolir la pena de muerte. 2. Redoblar los esfuerzos para asegurar el libre ejercicio del derecho a la libertad de expresión, tomando medidas para la protección de periodistas y defensores de derechos humanos. 3. Tomar medidas para enfrentar la trata de personas, brindando servicios legales de reparación y rehabilitación a las víctimas. 4. Adoptar medidas legislativas y campañas de sensibilización encaminadas a prohibir el matrimonio infantil. Deseamos a Camboya que este ciclo del EPU le sea exitoso. Muchas gracias.
I thank Chile for your statement and give the floor to China.
副主席女士，中国代表团欢迎柬埔寨建设性参加国别人权审议。柬埔寨大力发展经济，大幅降低贫困率，努力改善民生，保障特定群体权利，推进司法体制改革，促进社会正义。我们赞赏柬埔寨在促进和保护人权方面所取得的努力和成就。中方愿向柬埔寨提出3项建议：一是继续推进减贫事业，提高生活水平。
China, my apologies. The interpretation is not working, so we'll have to wait. Please start again.
Thank you. 副主席女士，中国代表团欢迎柬埔寨建设性参加国别人权审议。柬埔寨大力促进经济发展，大幅降低贫困率，努力改善民生，保障特定群体权利，推进司法体制改革，促进社会正义。我们赞赏柬埔寨在促进和保障人权方面所做努力和取得的成就。中方愿向柬埔寨提出3项建议：一是继续推进减贫事业，提高生活水平，为柬埔寨人民带来更多福祉；二是继续加强水资源综合管理，更好保障人民获得安全饮用水的权利；三是继续推进司法体制改革，努力实现人人享有司法正义的愿景。中方愿祝柬埔寨本次审议取得圆满成功。谢谢副主席女士。
I thank China for your statement and give the floor to Colombia.
Gracias, señora vicepresidente. Colombia da la bienvenida a la distinguida delegación del Reino de Camboya con ocasión del 4º ciclo de examen periódico universal, en el cual le desea los mayores éxitos. Colombia saluda los avances del Reino de Camboya en materia de derechos humanos desde el pasado ciclo del EPU y con ánimo constructivo recomienda primero promover la investigación de violaciones de los derechos humanos cometidas en el pasado régimen. Segundo, promover la modificación de la ley relativa a la prevención de la violencia doméstica para que las víctimas tengan acceso adecuado a la justicia. Tercero, impulsar medidas para garantizar el derecho a manifestarse pacíficamente. Y cuarto, adherirse a la Convención sobre el Estatuto de los Apátridas y la Convención para reducir los casos de apatridia, así como ratificar la Convención Internacional sobre Protección de Derechos de todos los trabajadores migratorios y de sus familiares, junto con el protocolo facultativo y el segundo protocolo facultativo del Pacto Internacional de Derechos Civiles y Políticos. Gracias, señora vicepresidente.
I thank Colombia for your statement and give the floor to Costa Rica.
Gracias, vicepresidente. Mi país agradece a Camboya por la presentación de su informe y reconoce su compromiso por cooperar con la Oficina del Alto Comisionado para los Derechos Humanos y la colaboración continua con relatores especiales y otros procedimientos especiales de este Consejo. Con espíritu constructivo, Costa Rica recomienda: 1. Incorporar el derecho humano a un ambiente limpio, saludable y sostenible en su legislación nacional, preferiblemente a nivel constitucional. 2. Ratificar el segundo protocolo facultativo al Pacto Internacional de Derechos Civiles y Políticos. 3. Acelerar los esfuerzos para crear una institución nacional independiente de derechos humanos que cumpla con los principios de París. Y 4. Garantizar que el uso de la fuerza en las manifestaciones sea excepcional y cumpla estrictamente con los principios de legalidad, precaución, necesidad, proporcionalidad y rendición de cuentas, y proporcionar formación integral y periódica en derechos humanos para los agentes de las fuerzas del orden encargados de la vigilancia durante las manifestaciones. Deseamos a Camboya una exitosa implementación. Gracias.
I thank Costa Rica for your statement and give the floor to Croatia.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Croatia welcomes the delegation of Cambodia and thanks them for the presentation of their national report. We commend Cambodia for hosting the OHCHR office and appreciate the country's cooperation with the HRC and its mechanisms. The National Disability Strategic Plan and efforts to promote inclusion are valuable developments for the protection of persons with disabilities. We encourage the authorities to provide an open political space free of threats and intimidation. Croatia has following recommendations. 1. Ensure free and open political space that allows opposition parties equal opportunities to run in the elections. 2. Create a specific anti-discrimination law for the protection of ethnic minorities. 3. Strengthen existing legislation with measures to prevent violence against women. And 4. Significantly strengthen efforts to prevent trafficking in persons, especially women and children. Croatia wishes Cambodia a successful review session. I thank you.
I thank Croatia for your statement and give the floor to Cuba.
Muchas gracias, señora vicepresidenta. Damos una calurosa bienvenida a la delegación de Camboya. Agradecemos su compromiso con el examen periódico universal y reconocemos los resultados en la implementación de las recomendaciones de ciclos anteriores. Destacamos los esfuerzos del país en la reducción de la pobreza, la reforma de la gobernanza, la modernización de las instituciones estatales y el desarrollo sostenible, integrador, equitativo y justo. Reconocemos la cooperación de Camboya con los procedimientos especiales, la Oficina del Alto Comisionado y otros mecanismos de la maquinaria de Naciones Unidas para los Derechos Humanos. Con un espíritu constructivo recomendamos: 1. Continuar implementando la Estrategia Nacional sobre Crecimiento, Empleo, Igualdad y Eficiencia con el fin de fortalecer el papel de la mujer como columna vertebral de la economía y la sociedad y garantizar la igualdad de género. 2. Continuar los esfuerzos para mejorar la calidad de vida de las personas con discapacidad y el acceso a un sistema de salud con calidad. Deseamos éxitos a Camboya en este cuarto ciclo del examen periódico universal. Muchas gracias.
I thank Cuba for your statement and give the floor to Cyprus.
Madam Vice President, Cyprus welcomes the delegation of Cambodia and thanks the delegation for the presentation of its national report. We are pleased to note the progress made towards reducing the poverty rate in the country and increasing labor earnings. We welcome, furthermore, the measures taken to promote the rights of persons with disabilities, namely the adoption of the National Disability Strategic Plan 2019-2023. Cyprus would like to make the following recommendations. 1. Ratify the second optional protocol to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights in relation to the abolition of the death penalty. 2. Take concrete measures to eliminate the barriers faced by girls to enrolling and remaining in schools. 3. Strengthen efforts to combat gender-based violence, including domestic violence. 4. Adopt targeted measures, including awareness-raising programs on the harmful effects of child marriages on the health, development, and education of girls. Thank you.
I thank Cyprus for your statement and give the floor to Czechia.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Czechia welcomes the delegation of Cambodia.
We commend Cambodia for cooperating with the Special Rapporteur and its stance towards the UPR process. Noting that the recommendations provided by Czechia in the previous UPR cycle are yet to be fully implemented, we wish to recommend Cambodia to strengthen efforts to prevent harassment and protect the rights of human rights defenders and journalists. Make every effort to ensure that the planned permanent mechanism for information and public opinion will not restrict access to a variety of information in order to combat false information spread. Find and apply a systemic solution in the fight against cybercrime, especially in the case of online scam centers. Accelerate the process of establishing a land register to strengthen the legal security of property regulations and rights, thereby preventing social discontent and ensuring the right to an adequate standard of living. We wish Cambodia a successful UPR. Thank you.
I thank Czechia for your statement and give the floor to Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
Madam Vice President, the DPRK delegation warmly welcomes the delegation of the Kingdom of Cambodia and notes with appreciation its national report. We commend the government of Cambodia for its efforts and tangible progress in the promotion and protection of human rights of its people through implementation of Cambodian Sustainable Development Goals between 2016 and 2030. We wish the government of Cambodia further progress in its endeavor for full enjoyment of human rights by its people and recommend the following. 1. Continue efforts to achieve economic growth aimed at raising the living standard of all people, including those living in the remote areas. 2. Continue efforts to create favorable conditions for ensuring access to free and quality education for all children. 3. Continue its efforts to improve implementation of its policies on public health and develop healthcare infrastructure in remote areas. We wish Cambodia a successful review. Thank you.
I thank Democratic People's Republic of Korea for your statement and give the floor to Denmark.
Thanks, Madam Vice President. Denmark welcomes the delegation of Cambodia and thanks it for its presentation and subsequent comments made. We acknowledge Cambodia's engagement with the UN Special Rapporteur and commend efforts to improve girls' access to education. However, Denmark remains concerned about shrinking civic space, including the dissolution of political parties and closure of media outlets. Furthermore, Denmark is concerned about the arbitrary arrests, mass trials and acts of violence against human rights defenders, political opponents and journalists. Denmark recommends Cambodia to 1. Bring the law on political parties and the law on associations and non-governmental organizations into accordance with the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And 2, immediately and unconditionally release individuals imprisoned for exercising their rights to peacefully assembly and association. Denmark wishes Cambodia a successful review. Thanks.
I thank Denmark for your statement and give the floor to Dominican Republic by video.
Gracias, señor presidente. La delegación de la República Dominicana saluda a la delegación de Cambodia y le agradece por la presentación de su informe nacional. Felicitamos al país por el reforzamiento del Plan de Acción Nacional para la erradicación del trabajo infantil y la eliminación de las peores formas de trabajo infantil 2016-2025, y así como por el Plan Estratégico Nacional para erradicar la tuberculosis, el cual tiene como objetivo diagnosticar la tuberculosis y proporcionar el tratamiento gratuito. En un ánimo constructivo, respetuosamente le recomendamos: primero, continuar los esfuerzos para abordar la corrupción y garantizar el acceso a la justicia para todos los segmentos de la sociedad. Aplicar las medidas para aumentar la capacidad de atención en los servicios nacionales de salud. Y por último, continuar sus esfuerzos para mejorar la calidad de la educación y facilitar el acceso a la educación para todos y todas, ampliando los servicios de educación a todos los niños y jóvenes en condición de igualdad. Le deseamos a Cambodia un exitoso EPU. Muchísimas gracias, señor presidente.
I thank Dominican Republic for your statement and give the floor to Egypt.
السيدة نائبة الرئيس، يرحب وفد مصر بالوفد رفيع المستوى لكمبوديا ويثمن ما عكسه التقرير الوطني من جهود حثيثة لتعزيز وحماية حقوق الإنسان على كافة المستويات. كما نرحب بالجهود الجارية نحو انضمام كمبوديا لعدد من الصكوك الدولية الرئيسية في مجال حقوق الإنسان وبخاصة الاتفاقية الدولية لحماية حقوق جميع العمال المهاجرين، ونشيد بالتعاون القائم مع الآليات الدولية لحقوق الإنسان والمستجدات الخاصة باعتماد القانون الخاص بإنشاء المؤسسة الوطنية لحقوق الإنسان والجهود ذات الصلة بإصلاح الحوكمة وتحديث مؤسسات الدولة ومكافحة الفساد ومكافحة الإتجار بالبشر. وفي إطار الحوار والتفاعل البناء نود أن نتقدم بالتوصيتين التاليتين: أولا، مواصلة الجهود الوطنية الرامية لمكافحة الفقر وتوفير الحماية الاجتماعية. ثانيا، مواصلة الجهود الرامية لتعزيز حقوق المرأة والطفل والأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة ومكافحة كافة أشكال التمييز ضدهم. وختاما، نتمنى كل التوفيق لوفد مملكة كمبوديا خلال الجلسة. شكرا السيدة نائبة الرئيس.
I thank Egypt for your statement and give the floor to Estonia.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Estonia welcomes the delegation of Cambodia and Cambodia's engagement in the UPR process and cooperation with UN human rights mechanisms. We note the progress in the area of economic rights, but remain concerned by the curtailing of democratic and civic space, particularly of further restrictions on the rights to participate in elections, as well as increasing national online surveillance. Estonia would like to recommend to Cambodia to: 1. Amend laws and regulations that unduly restrict the freedom of opinion and expression by bringing them into full compliance with human rights standards. 2. End the arbitrary interference, blocks, closure and surveillance of online and offline media and the use of repressive laws and censor and control the media. 3. Ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive health information by expanding the comprehensive sexuality education program in schools. And 4. Adopt a comprehensive anti-discrimination law to ensure full and effective protection against all forms of discrimination in all spheres. Estonia wishes Cambodia a successful review.
I thank Estonia for your statement and give the floor to Ethiopia.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Ethiopia welcomes the delegation of Cambodia to the 46th session of the UPR Working Group. We thank the delegation for the comprehensive national report and the oral update today. Ethiopia commends Cambodia for implementing the recommendations received during the previous UPR cycles and the efforts to further promote human rights in an inclusive manner. In a spirit of constructive dialogue, Ethiopia recommends to Cambodia to: 1. Continue strengthening institutional and legal frameworks to promote and protect human rights. And 2. Continue intensifying efforts to the poverty reduction and enhancement of the living standards of the people. Finally, Ethiopia wishes successful deliberation to the delegation of Cambodia in its engagement with the UPR Working Group. I thank you.
I thank Ethiopia for your statement and give the floor to Finland.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Finland welcomes the engagement of Cambodia in the UPR process. Finland positively notes that Cambodia hosted the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Cambodia last December. Finland respectfully recommends: 1. To ensure freedom of expression, association and peaceful assembly for all, including representatives of political parties, journalists and media workers, labor groups, human rights defenders and civil society. 2. To cease harassment, intimidation, arbitrary arrest, and unjust prosecution of political opposition, human rights defenders, journalists, and media workers and labor activists. 3. To ensure that fair trial guarantees, especially rights to access the outside world, family and lawyers, as provided in international law and standards, are respected and upheld in all cases. Finland wishes Cambodia a successful review. I thank you.
I thank Finland for your statement and give the floor to France.
La France souhaite la bienvenue à la délégation du Cambodge et elle participe à cet examen en ayant à l'esprit la tragédie du génocide que le Cambodge a subi il y a un demi-siècle et le processus de retour à la paix intérieure qui s'en est suivi. La France salue le maintien du Bureau du Haut-Commissariat aux droits de l'homme, le renouvellement du mandat du rapporteur spécial et la coopération des autorités cambodgiennes avec ce dernier. Elle recommande, dans un esprit d'amitié, premièrement, la peine de mort ayant été abolie, de ratifier le deuxième protocole facultatif se rapportant au pacte international, des droits civils et politiques. Deuxièmement, de garantir la pleine participation de l'ensemble des partis d'opposition et de la société civile à la vie politique et de libérer les représentants de l'opposition actuellement en détention. Troisièmement, de garantir la liberté d'expression des citoyens et des journalistes en révisant le code pénal cambodgien. Quatrièmement, de poursuivre les efforts en vue de l'égalité des droits pour les personnes LGBT+. Et cinquièmement, de mettre en place un mécanisme indépendant pour régler les conflits fonciers de manière équitable, participative et transparente. Je vous remercie.
I thank France for your statement and give the floor to Gambia.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The Gambia warmly welcomes the delegation from the Kingdom of Cambodia and commend them for their commitment to human rights, highlighted by the ratification of 8 out of the 9 key international human rights treaties and numerous protocols. We applaud Cambodia's efforts and in the spirit of constructive engagement, wish to offer the following recommendations. 1. Accelerate efforts to establish a national human rights institution in line with the Paris Principles. 2. Accede to the International Convention on the protection of the rights of all migrant workers and members of their families. 3. Adopt the laws on the protection of the rights of persons with disabilities and enhance protective services to prevent abuse and ensure the safety and well-being of all children, particularly those with disability. 4. Enhance its efforts to prevent statelessness by guaranteeing the birth registration of all persons born in Cambodia and provide legal pathways to citizenship or other forms of legal status for refugees. We wish the Cambodian delegation a successful review. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
I thank Gambia for your statement and give the floor to Georgia.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Georgia thanks the delegation of Cambodia for the presentation of the national report. My delegation positively views developments related to the adoption of the draft law of the establishment of the National Human Rights Institution in accordance with the Paris Principles, and we express hope for the timely approval of the above-mentioned legislation. We acknowledge some progress related to the fight against trafficking in persons, and we encourage the government to vigorously tackle the root causes of the human trafficking. We welcome Cambodia's cooperation with the UN human rights mechanisms, including the extension of the Memorandum of Understanding with the OHCHR and hosting of the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Cambodia since 1993. Here we, Georgia, would like to recommend to Cambodia to take further steps towards adoption of the comprehensive child protection law that is based on principles and provisions of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, to bolster initiatives related to the improvement of their national education system. We wish the delegation of Cambodia a successful UPR. I thank you.
I thank Georgia for your statement and give the floor to Germany. Microphone, please.
The microphone is on. Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Vice President. Germany welcomes the delegation of Cambodia and appreciates the government's engagement in constructive dialogues with the LGBTIQ+ community, as well as the inclusion of lesbian, bisexual, transgender persons in the National Action Plan to prevent violence against women. However, Germany remains concerned about the continued limitations and slow progress and improvement of working conditions for civil society. Germany therefore recommends Cambodia to first, take measures to ensure civic participation in political and public life without intimidation, especially with a view to limiting the use of strategic lawsuits against public participation. Second, enact legal amendments to recognize same-sex marriages as equal before the law in order to achieve non-discrimination, full equality and social inclusion of LGBTIQ+ persons in Cambodia. And third, simplify union registration and reduce regulations that limit peaceful assembly and the right to strike, and improve the protection of union leaders and workers. Germany wishes Cambodia a successful UPR. Thank you.
I thank Germany for your statement and give the floor to Ghana.
Okay. Madam Vice President, I am pleased to warmly welcome the delegation of Cambodia to this 4th UPR cycle. We commend the strong commitment made by the government of Cambodia to strengthen and accelerate the implementation of the National Action Plan on the reduction of child labor. We further applaud the launch of the National Disability Strategic Plan, which is a bold response to the commitment to promote and protect the rights of persons with disability. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, Ghana recommends the following: ratify the Convention on the Protection of the Rights of all Migrant Workers and members of their families, and fast-track the establishment of an independent national human rights institution in consultation with relevant stakeholders. Ghana wishes Cambodia a successful review. I thank you.
I thank Ghana for your statement and give the floor to Iceland.
Madam Vice President, Iceland welcomes the delegation of Cambodia and its national report. In the spirit of constructive engagement, Iceland recommends the following. 1. Amend the law on the prevention of domestic violence and the protection of victims and align it with the criminal and civil code, ensuring that it defines, prohibits and criminalizes all forms of GBV. 2. Ensure the accessibility and availability of appropriate, good quality sexual and reproductive health services. 3. Guarantee universal access to sexual and reproductive health information by expanding CSE in schools, vocational training programs, and out-of-school settings. 4. Adopt and implement a transparent administrative procedure for legal gender recognition based on self-determination. 5. Recognize same-sex marriages as equal before the law. 6. Ensure the effective inclusion and protection of persons of diverse socio-ethnic and in relevant laws and policies. Iceland wishes Cambodia all success for its review. I thank you.
I thank Iceland for your statement and give the floor to India.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. India welcomes the delegation of Cambodia for presentation of its national report. We appreciate efforts of the government of Cambodia to establish a national human rights institution and the efforts towards improving access to healthcare services, which has resulted in a reduction in maternal and infant mortality rates since the last review. In the spirit of constructive engagement, we would like to make following recommendations. 1. Continue efforts towards improving access to affordable and quality healthcare, especially for the poor and groups in vulnerable situations. 2. Continue efforts to improve the quality of education at all levels, especially in rural areas, including making primary education compulsory for all children and focus on equitable and inclusive access to education. And 3. Make efforts to reduce gender-based violence in all of its forms, including putting practical steps to reduce domestic abuse. We wish the distinguished delegation of Cambodia all success. I thank you.
I thank India for your statement and give the floor to Indonesia.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Indonesia welcomes the esteemed delegation of Cambodia and thanks them for presenting their national report. As a fellow ASEAN member state, we recognize Cambodia's active participation in ASEAN human rights mechanism. We commend Cambodia for its achievements in enhancing human rights protection and fostering robust cooperation with various human rights mechanisms, including the OSCSR. While acknowledging these efforts, Indonesia recommends the following. 1. Improve access to quality healthcare and education, particularly in rural areas and among vulnerable groups, by reducing financial barriers to education and enhancing healthcare facilities. 2. Intensify efforts to combat human trafficking through rigorous enforcement of relevant laws. 3. Enhance endeavors to safeguard the rights of migrant workers within the sphere of labor rights. Indonesia remains committed to supporting Cambodia and wishes for a successful UPR. I thank you.
I thank Indonesia for your statement. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, this was the last speaker on my list. So I will now give the floor to the delegation of Cambodia to address observations and comments and to make any final remarks. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. Representatives of UN member states, we thank you for your comments, recommendations, and acknowledgement of Cambodia's endeavor to build a more inclusive society that places great emphasis on ensuring fundamental human rights and sustainable development. Madam Vice President, I will address two further issues in my closing. First, with regard to the second optional protocol to the ICCPR, the royal government will consider this, but we also would like to highlight that our Constitution does enshrine the banning of death penalties. Second, with respect to online scams as raised by the United Kingdom, Thailand, Mexico, United States, and Brazil, the royal government takes this matter seriously, and we hope that our draft law on cybersecurity, cybercrime will enable the government to further combat such crimes. Furthermore, as a showing that we take this seriously, last week the Digital Security Committee, chaired by the Prime Minister himself, had taken its first meeting. In addition, Cambodia last month hosted the first ASEAN working group on anti-online scam, with Thailand being its chair. Madam Vice President, members of the Troika, honorable members of the UN, members of civil society, as we reflect on our past with the current turmoil and uncertainty of the world, we underscore the delicate fragility of peace, and we continue to uphold this value to the utmost capability to avoid the recurrence of war and genocide. The hard-earned achievements, social growth, and institutional development made in the last 5 years forged should be acknowledged. Human rights are aspirational core values to be achieved through a peer learning process that cannot be divorced from national characteristics and local context. Cambodia takes a whole-of-society approach, oftentimes making difficult policy decisions to maintain our hard-earned peace and stability while balancing competing rights. Cambodia remains committed to the promotion and protection of human rights in accordance with the Cambodian Constitution and our national context. We will thoroughly take stock of the recommendations received today in consultation with stakeholders and consider how they can be implemented and best contribute to the promotion and protection of human rights in Cambodia and the well-being of our people. The realization of human rights is a continuous journey. We are always committed to achieving better outcomes for our people, and we understand the need to continue to build hard-earned political trust from our people and the world in Cambodia's democracy and institutions. We are thankful to Madam Vice President for overseeing the procedure, to the members of the Troika, Japan, Ghana, and Montenegro, and the Secretariat of the UPR Working Group for your support and assistance, and to all representatives of UN member states for your interactive comments and recommendations and acknowledgements. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Excellency. I want to thank the whole delegation for the presentation and participation in this review. The report of the review will be prepared by the members of the Troika, namely the representatives of Ghana, Japan, and Montenegro. In accordance with the procedure implemented in 2015, the recommendations section of the report is scheduled for distribution on Friday, 10 May at 12:30 p.m. and will be considered for adoption on the same day as of 4 p.m. The full report, including the summary section, will be circulated by email on Friday, 17 May 2024. This brings us to the end of our meeting. We will reconvene this afternoon at 3:30 p.m. to consider the adoption of the recommendation section of the draft reports of Yemen, Vanuatu, North Macedonia, the Comoros, and Slovakia. I hereby close the 15th meeting of the 46th session of the UPR Working Group.